You're listening to Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Right on, right on, right on. That's to you, Keith. Fade to Black. Here we go. Today is Friday, March 7th. Just 65 days into the new year. As always, we are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your host, Jimmy Church. Welcome, everyone listening around the world. I just wanted to say, had a little post, and it said, how many times are you going to say, let's get this show cracking? Well, there's the first one. That this is Jimmy Church Ego Radio. Obviously a first-time listener because this is the most unegoed thing out there. But let's get this show cracking anyway. Welcome, everybody. And I have been, as you can tell, for the last couple of weeks, I've really been looking forward to tonight's show. So let's get it cracking. Let's get to those birthdays. Guitarist Ernie Isley of the Isley Brothers, 62 years old. Jimi Hendrix was a friend of the band way back when. And when Ernie was like, 8, 9, 10 years old, he used to watch Jimmy come in and hang out and play with the band. And now today, Ernie kind of looks like Jimmy, 62 years old. And I'm going to tell a little Isley Brothers story here in a second. Anyway, our dead guy birthday today is scientist John Herschel, born in 1792. He discovered the moons of Saturn and Uranus, investigated ultraviolet rays, and don't ask me how he did that 250 years ago. It's pretty impressive. All right. What was I? Oh, yeah. Isley Brothers. Seeing that it was Ernie's birthday today, and I just stopped and thought, I just got to tell this story really quick. So just allow me to indulge for a second. I used to work with Angela Winbush, who was married at the time to Ronald Isley of the Isley Brothers, leader of the Isley Brothers, Ronald, who's a good guy. And in Hollywood, where they lived, Angela hired me. We were friends, but she hired me to put a little recording studio in their house on the second floor. So it took me about a week, and I'm about halfway through this project, maybe 3 days in. And I had showed up at around 9 o'clock at night and to finish stuff. And I'm in the studio on the second floor, which is a bedroom that was converted into a studio. Nice house, big house, as it should be. And Angela comes in, who is the coolest lady in the world. She comes in, she goes, Jimmy, I'm gonna go up to Wendy's and get something to eat. Are you hungry? I said, yeah. She goes, okay, I'll be right back. And she disappears. I'm in the studio, wiring and doing stuff. And next to the studio is a bathroom. I walk out of the studio to go to the bathroom, relieve myself. And as I walk out of the bathroom and I turn off the light in the dark hallway, I hear a gun cock and I spin around, and I'm looking down the barrel of a chrome-plated beast, one of those Clint Eastwood Dirty Harry 3-foot-long pistols, and it's right on the tip of my nose. And I look, I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you doing in my house? I said, Ronald, it's me, Jimmy. What are you doing in my... Ronald, it's me, Jimmy. Just here working. Man, where's Angela? She went to Wendy's. He uncocks the gun, walks down the hallway, disappears in the bedroom. I go into the studio, and I get down on the floor on my hands and knees and prayed. I'm not kidding either. A few minutes later, Angela shows up. She comes in, and she looks at me, and I must have been just white as a ghost. And she says, what's wrong? I said, I almost got shot by Ronald. She runs out of the studio, and I listen to her in the hallway for the next 15 minutes yelling at Ronald Isley. Tell him I'm sorry, man. Angela, tell him I'm sorry. And that, my friends, is a true story. And listen, Angela, or if anybody knows Angela, just have her get a hold of me and tell the story. I would love for her to come on the air, because that's the one and only time I've ever looked down the wrong barrel of a gun. All right. So I told my Isley Brothers story. Had nothing to do with tonight's show. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You know what to do. At JChurchRadio. Facebook, YouTube. You know what to do. Everything is there. Click, like, follow, subscribe, friend. Get to it. That's where we stay in touch with you. Tonight, I'm going to open up the lines with Mr. Bart Sibrel. I've been saying Sibrel all week, and I apologize to him today. It is Sibrel, and he will be on later, and I do want to take some phone calls. It's going to be a great show. So let's get it cracking. Email us throughout the show, Jimmy at jimmychurchradio.com. And I wanted to make a couple of comments about the forums. The forums today, and yesterday, incredible. I got as much done in there as I could. I did more reading than anything else. But the forums, it makes me feel good, and everybody here, good that everybody's having a good time over there and, for the most part, behaving themselves. The bumper music tonight, as always, is going to be Doug Aldrich. The Alien Pics Gallery is still there under Bob Schroeder. And I said last night there was a bunch of email that came in yesterday and today about that, wanting some more stuff. Well, after last night's show, I think we have a whole handful of stuff to post. Now, a couple of comments about last night. I think everybody knew I was taken a little bit out of my comfort zone. And what I mean by that is this show is for fun, for entertainment, to learn, to come and hang out and have a good time. And last night it just swung a little bit out of control. And I lost my composure a little bit. But the reason for that, and I think everybody can respect me, and I appreciate everybody's, email and post about it, that I handle myself okay and correctly. But all I want is straight answers. It's not that big of a deal. Tell me yes or no or something, but never tell me that you don't care. That is not an answer for you or for me. And I was a little bit frustrated, but I think all of our questions were answered last night. And I think everybody will agree with me on that. Now, moving on. I got that off my chest. Okay? I feel better. But got a new segment of the show we're going to start right now. It's called Funny Post of the Day. And this comes right off of JimmyChurchRadio.com, comes right off of the forum from Skinny Bob. And when I read this today, I literally not figuratively, literally spit coffee all over the studio. And I had to spend about 20 minutes wiping things down after I read this. And it's in the Billy Meyer thread, or one of them. And it says, and I quote, "The sound of a supposed UFO sounds exactly like the breeze vibrating a fishing line tied between two trees with a metal UFO hanging from it." End quote. I almost want to read that again. You got to go read it for yourself. Skinny, you the man. That's all I have to say to that. Tonight's show is going to be pretty cool. And what is causing this show, and I'll probably mention this in a little bit again when we get Bart on, is this. I'm a big movie guy. And at Casa de Church, we all are. Raised my girls that way. My wife, Rita, knows more about movies than just about anybody on all levels. But we are big Stanley Kubrick fans. Who isn't? Anybody with a mind is a Kubrick fan, I would think. And we're big Kubrick fans. And so I had gone through, and this is why I want everybody to maybe try to do what I did. Go through the same methodology and come to the same point at the end of the road. And this is what we did. I was doing some research into Kubrick and documentaries and just, trying to find out stuff that I maybe didn't know about him. And then I stumbled upon the Shining documentaries that are out there about the hidden messages in The Shining. And then I found another movie called The Dark Side of the Moon mockumentary, about how Stanley Kubrick had photographed and done all the film and sets and so forth for the moon landing hoax. And everybody is in that movie. I'm talking about Kessinger's in the movie, George Schultz is in the movie. So anyway, go check it out. It's pretty cool. But then I found this next guy, Bart Sibrel, and his documentary. And it was the chain of events. You never know where you're going to end up when you start to study a subject. So I started with Kubrick, just wanted to find out some things about his life. And a month later, I'm knee-deep into the moon landing hoax. Now, before this next segment starts with Bart, I will say, everybody knows, I'm an American, proud of this country, proud of freedom of speech, which allows this show to happen, all of that. And I saw the moon landings on TV live with my own two eyes. So that's where it stands with me. But now that I know more and more about technology and just things, now I'm scratching my head. So we're going to take a journey tonight. And what happens at the end of it, that's for you. But hopefully you'll learn something tonight. And at the end of it, we can all just maybe question things. And that is what is so great about this country. All right. So with that, let's take our first break. This is KJCR. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. When I come back, that's right, Bart Sibrel and the Apollo moon hoax landing. Get those emails going and we'll take your calls in the second segment. Stay with us. Don't touch that mouse. Back in a second.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National tax experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. It doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right. Welcome back. Fade to Black. KJCR of the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Let's get this show cracking. That's 4 times. See how many times I can get that in tonight. Should be the last one. All right. Email Jimmy at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. Friend, like, subscribe. We'll get all of this week's shows up on YouTube here very shortly. And yes, I'll say the words. Podcast. We are working on that right now. There's a whole thing. The company that we're going with, it requires RSS feeds and automatic downloads and uploads and all of that stuff. And we're getting the technical side of that up and done, but it will be soon. I promise. In the meantime, it is YouTube for your resource for replays and archives. Also, we have the archives page at JimmyChurchRadio.com. Very simple. Click on it. It's all there. Should be. We try to stay on top of it. All right. Let's get the show cracking. Okay, that's number 6. Bart Sibrel is an award-winning filmmaker, writer, and investigative journalist who has been producing movies and television programs for 30 years. During this time, he has owned 5 production companies, has been employed by 2 of the 3 major networks, and produced films shown on NBC, ABC, CNN, TLC, USA, BET, as well as The Tonight Show with Jay Leno. To discuss his films, he has appeared and has been interviewed on The Daily Show, Geraldo, NBC, CNN, Fox, Tech TV, Coast to Coast, and The Abrams Report. Articles featuring Mr. Sibrel's films have been published in Time Magazine, USA Today, New York Times, Washington Post, LA Times. His top awards from the American Motion Picture Society include Best Cinematography, Best Editing, and Top 10 Director. I would like to welcome to the program Mr. Bart Sibrel. Bart, are you with us, sir?
I am, Jimmy. How's it going?
It is going fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time with us tonight. And it's going to be a journey. I think you agree.
Everything is.
It is. It is. So you're in Nashville, Music City. Kind of a strange place for somebody that does what you do, editing, directing, right? Everything else, acting as well. So did you live out here in LA and then move to Nashville, or how'd you wind up there?
My dad was in the Air Force, and he retired at age 40 from Beale Air Force Base in Northern California and got a job teaching here at a local university. So I moved here when I was 12 and started professionally acting when I was 14, making movies about 18 years old, and started a production company in my early 20s and just kind of got stuck here been here ever since.
Do you do all of your editing and directing? Everything is done out of Nashville?
Pretty much. I have my own camera and editing equipment, and I generally do all the editing pretty much myself. And I used to do all of the camera work. I'm trying to not do that anymore and kind of pass it on to a cinematographer. But I've, been doing it for so long, and I know how I want it. It just seems to save time if I do it myself. So
right. Your camera crew, your sound guys, and stuff like that. Now, this is kind of off topic a little bit, but are they local there in Nashville? Do you pick them up when you go on location?
Occasionally, we'll hire a local crew. Like I was filming Buzz Aldrin in, I guess it was Beverly Hills, California, and we hired a local cameraman. And then, I'd bring people with me. When I shot Neil Armstrong in New York, we brought our own camera guy.
Right.
So that is film, not shot.
Now, okay, I got you. Well,
I was filming for the state governor one time, and I drive up to the little gate with the intercom, and they say, "May I help you?" I said, "Yeah, I'm here to shoot the governor." You know what they said?
Yeah, not good.
They said, "Come on in." I got to be careful. I wasn't shooting Neil Armstrong. I was filming him.
Yeah, right. The okay. Well, just let me say this really quick. I start out the interview the same way each time, which is this. This is a free form conversation. You and I are just sitting in my living room. We'll see where it goes. But I'm sure that it's going to be interesting. You and I find it interesting, so will everybody else, and that's it. So, are you ready?
Sure.
Okay. Now, for me, and I mentioned this to you before, it doesn't matter how, when, or why, but I out of everybody in the documentary, I've only met one, and that's Buzz. I've met Buzz and his wife. And I know where they live down in the Wilshire corridor. Is that where that was shot? Were you at his condominium?
We didn't film that at the condominium, though I've been there.
Okay, so you
said that it was off the record, but anyway.
Yeah.
But we filmed nearby at some hotel. I forgot what it was, the Ritz-Carlton or something. I forget.
Okay. I was just curious if that's where that was shot at, because it looks very similar, and
yeah, it was very. From what I remember, it's close to where you live.
Yeah, right. Okay. Anyway, so the documentary itself, and I had said, I don't know if you were listening before I brought you on, but the documentary itself and how I stumbled upon it, and I want to know how you got into it, and I'll ask you that in a second. But how I stumbled upon it was this strange little trip that I took through the life of Stanley Kubrick and documentaries, and then to the mockumentary Dark Side of the Moon, and then stumbled upon you. But a funny thing happened on the way. But I remembered that, I don't know how the word got out. Did it get into the media about Buzz, cold cocking you? Was that something that was brought out in the media? Because I had heard about it. So did that get out there? Did other news outlets pick up on it?
Yeah, I think we initially sold that footage of the punch to the Tonight Show, and they did a couple of skits about it. In fact, I think they talked about it 2 or 3 nights in a row. They did a really cool reenactment of Columbus confronting someone who didn't think he sailed to America around the world or something. Anyway, I thought it was pretty funny. And then we sold it, licensed it to, Good Morning America or whoever else. And, I felt like sending Buzz a box of cigars, for the free publicity.
Right.
And you wonder, if a guy cannot control himself, how can he possibly, be an astronaut under difficult conditions?
Well, this is the thing for me. And I've seen you've sent me some other footage, and I wish I could share that. But my point is this: you and I'm going to say this in the kindest way, but I know you're going to understand. It is very uncomfortable at times to watch that, and it's and the reason why it's uncomfortable is, first off, it's the position, it's the subject matter, but also the fact that if you genuinely walked on the moon and you're being confronted with that subject, don't you just spin around and go, dude, of course I did. And what Bible do you want me to swear on? Of course, what would you like, but instead it just seems like each one of the astronauts, out of the dearest respect, by the way, I want to say this correctly, but they just didn't want to deal with it. And I didn't understand why they chose to handle that subject like they did. And was it like that with just about everybody?
Yeah, I kind of look at it the same way you do, Jimmy. I mean, after A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon was produced, which if your listeners go to Sibrel, Sibrel.com, just click on the YouTube link and that film will come up. That's the one where we showcase the newly discovered footage of them faking a shot unedited right in front of your eyes, which of course proves they didn't go. And then once that film came out, I thought, well, why don't I just ask the astronauts to swear on the Bible? And so we tracked down about 8 of them. And when one kicked me and one punched me, we came up with the title Astronauts Gone Wild. That one I think you have to buy the DVD of, but the other one's available for free. And basically, I see it the same way you do. If I walked on the moon and someone, asked me to swear in a Bible whether I did or not, I would find that hysterically funny. But it was like walking up to him in front of his wife and saying, "How's your mistress?" when he's cheating on her. You see, if he really walked on the moon, it would be like throwing a feather at him. But if I'm exposing him on national TV in front of his entourage, that's why he got angry, and it would be the only reason to get angry.
It did what? Okay, I have to ask you a couple of obvious questions. One, where did you get the footage? But I'm going to ask that later because I want to build up to the point where the footage is more relevant in the conversation. So we'll get to that in a second. But was it the footage that got you into this mystery, or was there something else that triggered it? And how did the documentary evolve?
Basically, I mentioned my dad was in the Air Force, and so when they allegedly walked on the moon in 1969, I was 4 years old. I was asleep in bed, and my father, being an officer, he got these kind of VIP packet of photographs of Apollo 11. He gave them to me, and I had like 15 pictures of Apollo 11 on my bedroom wall from age 4 to 14. Looked at them 365 days a year for 10 years. So I've been seeing these pictures nearly 4,000 times. And then when I'm 14, I see a program on that has a retired NASA contractor by the name of Bill Casing, and he says he worked at NASA. He was one of the few people who saw the whole picture through the departmentalization because he edited their memos for grammatical reasons. And he saw these memos saying successful moon landing on the first attempt was 1 in 10,000. He saw all these schedule slippages. He saw people watering down alcohol that they used to clean parts with and drinking it on the job. And he just saw there's no way possible they were going to go to the moon before the end of the 60s, like Kennedy had said. So after I watched that program, I went back to my bedroom wall and looked at the pictures. And, it's kind of like Eyes Wide Shut. You see something a million times and you really don't see it because of its familiarity.
Right.
And then I started looking at them. Fortunately, I was with an open mind, very important. And sure enough, I saw things that were consistent with studio lighting and a studio set rather than, sunlight like they're supposed to be taken under. Oddly enough, 10 years went by. By that time, I was a professional filmmaker, and one day I'm editing for the man who produced the program I saw on TV 10 years earlier. And I said, "Hey, you remember that guy who was on your show? Do you remember his name?" He said, "No, but call the San Francisco office." I did. They said they were 2 or 3 days away from deleting all 10-year-old files.
No way, really?
Had I called a couple of days later, I would have never found out his name. So I found out his name, checked out, found out that he published, like half a dozen books, and one of which was We Never Went to the Moon. And I remember calling him up from a payphone just in case they didn't go to the moon, and just in case Bill Casing had been knocked off, and just in case someone was pretending to be him so that people with juicy leads, would go to the CIA or whatever, just in case.
Right.
I called him from a payphone, and after a few seconds, he has such warm personality. He's the real article, and he said, "Well, Bart, you're a filmmaker. You should make a film about this." So I basically paid myself a salary for 6 months to do nothing but research, and found out, the shadows, which should be parallel in sunlight, they intersect in a number of the pictures. The Soviets had 5 times the amount of man hours in space. They launched the first satellite, the first animal, the first man, the first woman, the first spacewalk, the first crew of 3. And the administrator of NASA here resigns days before the first Apollo mission without explanation. 2 of the 3 astronauts on the first mission refused to be interviewed about it. All these things seemed a little strange, and I said, there's at least a 1 out of 4 chance, based on what I've come upon so far, that they didn't go to the moon. Now, I like puzzles. I've liked puzzles since I was a kid. I have a relentless, never say die personality. And I figured if anyone could figure out whether they went to the moon, it would be me. But seeing how they might really have not gone, this could be dangerous. And I thought, I want to have a wife and family someday. Why should I risk my life for someone else's mistake? So I turned down the project. And then about five years went by, and I started reading the Bible and realized, there is an ultimate right or wrong, good or evil, light and darkness. And I'm going to die anyway. So the way I look at it, Jimmy, is if they could go to the moon, that would have a certain level of significance historically to mankind. But if they couldn't go, and they lied about it, and they embezzled billions of dollars, and they murdered people to keep it a secret, that's more profound of an event historically than if they had actually gone. Do you see that? Well, faking of the moon landing is much more significant historically than if they really went. And I realized if they didn't go, this is a monumental truth that mankind needs to know about, and I realized it is worth time for the world to know.
How does your dad handle this? Him being a career, United States Air Force veteran.
Well, people in the intellectual aviation science community, which is quite a bit of people, they take it as a personal pride that we, they, I, be it in that community, American or whatever, went to the moon. It's like watching a football game from your living room sofa and watching your team from your town, none of which are actually from your town or state, and saying, we won. So he's kind of the same thing. He considered it absurd, that we didn't go to the moon because of pride. If you think about all the potential conspiracies, for example, 9/11, I don't know whether it was or not, but the point is 3,000 people died regardless of who did it. Kennedy, he's dead regardless of who did it. But this, on the other hand, was really the only positive conspiracy. It's a positive thing. Like if your mother won the Nobel Prize and is now deceased, and I said, well, she murdered 5 people to win that. You just don't want to hear about it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Even
right,
if it's true, it's this psychological. It's amazing how people say, I was there. I mean, what do you mean you were there? And they say, well, I saw it on TV.
Right.
Like, oh, and that means that you were there. It's so, the simplicity of it is this. If it were so easy to go to the moon in the 60s with 1960s technology that had less computing power than a $10 watch today, then there would be bases there by now. When Columbus sailed to the New World, just months or years later, everybody sailed to the New World. When Lewis and Clark went west, weeks or months later, people went west.
Yeah, it didn't take long, did it?
Yeah. When Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic, it was just months before people flew across the Atlantic. When they did first flight, it was months before other people did powered flight. It's like saying I did cold fusion, and you say, show me, and I say, well, I can't do it. Come back in 50 years. I mean,
well, you raise a good point.
It doesn't make any sense. No one can repeat that event.
Absolutely, and the more, and again, I'm an American, and I really believe we went to the moon. Okay, I do, because I saw it too with my own two eyes. I did. I saw it. I was a kid, but I did. I sat on my Uncle Bob's lap and watched him land on the moon. It seemed like it took it forever to happen. You know, the lunar module just going across the surface of the moon. When is this going to get over? Why can't they land there? Why don't they land there? Why don't they land there? You know what I mean? But that's how I feel. But then when I started to get into some of the more factual facts, and it's not so much the blowing of the flag and the breeze, you know, okay, whatever. I'm serious about that. It's not so much that. It's when I just look at today, and I know where technology is today, and I know where it was in 1969 because I was there, and you can't compare the two eras. And so when you look at it like that, why haven't we gone back? Why did it just stop? And I don't think it was the Vietnam War. I don't think it was budgets. I don't believe we weren't interested. And, you know, it all goes back to your point. And it's a very simple one. After Lindbergh crossed, after Columbus crossed, after every great discovery that we have done in any new world, we expanded and we went further. And we have never gone back to the moon. And not only that, Bart, nobody else has either.
Yeah, you think about it, China's the most industrialized nation on the planet, and they say they might be able to send a man to the moon 60 years after Apollo 11.
Well, and it's a little bit of that. I hear some echo here. Hold on. I think I have some reverb on somewhere. Okay, so anyway, can you still hear me?
Sure, I'm sure.
Okay, great.
Langley, Virginia, coming back to you.
It's gone. I had something tweaked, like minus 60 on a fader, just a little tinge of digital reverb in the background. But anyway, when the Van Allen belt is brought into consideration, which I had read about before I actually saw your documentary. But when you take the Van Allen belt into consideration, this is the thing that, and I don't know if you've ever thought about this. Okay, it's there as a donut. Okay, for everybody that's listening to the program right now, go to jimmychurchradio.com right now. The gallery is up for Bart Sibrel, and it's in the same spot that it is every night. So just go ahead and scroll down. We've got 15 photographs there. And so everybody just go now. It's kind of like lemmings to the sea. You know, I'm just watching everybody head to the site. Okay, so everybody go to jimmychurchradio.com. Scroll down to the normal spot, and there the first picture says Van Allen. Click that and open it. And this is directly out of your documentary, but it says it really well. We've got two donut-shaped belts that wrap around the Earth. Now, this is what I ask myself, Bart. If that is a problem, if that radiation is a problem, and we know that it is at both stages of the belt, in each belt, then why don't they shoot the rockets around? Why aren't we launching in another direction? And why do we have to fly through the Van Allen belt? You know, but hold on, and I want you to answer that in a second, because that would be a great counter argument or answer to this Van Allen belt radiation question about the Apollo moon hoax. You know, and so if they, I don't know why that they didn't say in the very beginning, hey, we're flying around the Van Allen belt. We're not flying through it. Okay, so there you go. There's the question.
Well, first of all, let's explain to your listeners what the Van Allen radiation belts are. Most people don't know about them, but beginning at about 1,000 miles up. Now, keep in mind, the space shuttle only orbits in the space station around 230 miles, so about 800 miles below them, below the radiation belt. So this radiation field that starts at 1,000 miles up, it extends 25,000 miles, so it's 25,000 miles thick. Every space mission has been well below the Van Allen radiation belt and never went through it, except going to the moon, you'd have to go through it. Now, there is a little opening in it at the North and South Pole, but you have to launch in order to conserve fuel near the equator. That's why the launch site is in southern Florida.
Right.
It's the southernmost part of the continental United States. And then you have to kind of orbit near the equator, and there's really not fuel enough to go make a little detour around it. Now, no human has gone through it except, to the moon and back. Now, in 1994, the space shuttle went to 365 miles, its highest altitude ever. And CNN issued a report, and I'm going to quote it word for word because their Geiger counter started going off the map, and the radiation was so severe. Mind you, it's 635 miles away from the radiation. The astronauts would close their eyes and see sparks of light of radiation hitting the retinas of their closed eyes. So you got to imagine, pick a spot 600 miles away with, say, a nuclear explosion, and you close your eyes right now and you can see the radiation 600 miles away. That's how dangerous it is. And they said this on CNN. The radiation belt surrounding the Earth is more dangerous than previously believed. Now, the interesting thing is no one connected the dots. Why would astronauts at 365 miles up know more about the radiation than the Apollo astronauts who went through it 12 times, 6 times to the moon and 6 times returning from the moon?
Right.
Remember, they said it's more dangerous than previously believed. Previously believed is going to the moon.
Right.
So the only way that people at 365 miles could know more about it than the Apollo astronauts who went through it is if the Apollo astronauts didn't go through it. and that's simply the case. No one really connects the dots. Just like when they discovered a fake moon rock, there's a curator in a museum in Amsterdam opens this hermetically sealed box that's never supposed to be opened after watching my film and got curious about the authenticity of the moon landings. And they had this moon rock in there, personally given to the prime minister from Neil Armstrong, and they found out it's a piece of petrified wood. And yet no one has the sense to ask, if the moon rocks are fake, what about the mission? If the radiation belt is more dangerous, to the space shuttle astronauts, then how could the Apollo astronauts have known nothing about it? You see, it doesn't make any sense.
Well, when one of the big eye-openers for me, and as a matter of fact, out of all of the data that is available for both sides of this debate, the one thing is the one thing to take into serious consideration is the Van Allen belt. You can talk about technology, okay, that adds, it's fuel to the fire. Everything else is just adding on to the pile. But the Van Allen belt, seriously, is something that when you consider how close to death it would actually bring you, that we should have seen these astronauts dropping like flies, but they're all alive today. And
I spoke on the telephone with the world's leading expert of the Van Allen radiation belt, and I said, ask him, how do you know they're not lethal? And he said, because the Apollo astronauts went through them to the Earth, to the moon and back.
That's his answer?
That's his answer.
Why? And this is the other thing. This is, and I don't think I've heard you address this in your documentary, but this is how my mind works. So I have to ask one of the obvious questions. The spacesuits are just cloth. There's nothing there for radiation, as far as I know. And if I'm wrong, correct me. And I'm here to learn too. But those are just pressurized, linen cloth suits. There's no lead lining or anything like of that my dentist wears. When I get an X-ray, people are jumping behind walls and wearing lead vest and everything else. But they're going up into space, number one, with just a spacesuit on through the Van Allen belt. That's a concern. And number two, the walls of the space capsule are literally paper thin. You could probably punch a hole in it if you wanted to. You could probably go up and just whack it and rip it wide open. So that's not blocking any radiation. Why would they design it like that? Because they weren't flying through the Van Allen belt. They didn't have to worry about it. Is that my mind working? Is that my mind working correctly, or am I just off the charts?
No, that has to be the primary reason why they didn't go to begin with and why they can't go now. You know, Kennedy was not a scientist. The Soviets, the very first time they put a man in orbit, he orbited the Earth 20 times. Weeks later, the U.S. put a man, and he only went from Florida to California and splashed down for 15 minutes. And, you know, Kennedy was inspired by it, and he said, hey, let's set a goal to go to the moon before the end of the decade of the 1960s, before December 31st, 1969. And, of course, they were within 5% of that goal. Now, sometime during his administration or Johnson administration, they found out that they could not go. Now, they had already boasted to the Soviet Union, boasted to our citizens, boasted to the world that we would do it before the decade was out. And, of course, we know pride comes before a fall, and America is a very arrogant, prideful country. And rather than eat humble pie and admit we had bitten off more than we could chew, we did what we do in poker with a pair of twos.
Right.
We bluffed. And it was considered a military bluff to make the Soviets think we were more advanced than we really were at the time. Plus, you know, Nixon was president. The Vietnam War protests, he thought, were going to basically cause the demolition of the government. And so this is like a pep rally, something to cheer about. Now, do you really think they're going to risk killing 3 national heroes on live TV? This way they could guarantee a successful end to the story.
But couldn't the Soviets, I mean, they had a very advanced space program, and by any measure, it was more advanced than we were, certainly, at the time. Wouldn't they have a way of tracking us to the moon? And if they, and I understand this is, you know, me being devil's advocate here, but wouldn't they, if we didn't go to the moon, wouldn't they be the first ones to call us on it?
It appears that way, but here's the answer. First of all, their rocket technology was supreme, but tracking technology is completely different. The American NASA program launched a satellite called the Tetra satellite to simulate transmissions coming from the moon so that the ground crews could rehearse. Recently, a retired ground crew member during Apollo said this: he could tell no difference whatsoever between a simulation and an actual flight. And then the government claimed that the Tetra satellite accidentally fell from orbit and crashed in the ocean.
Wait. Let me hold on. Let me stop you right there. If he said they couldn't tell the difference between an actual launch and a simulation, is he referring to the material that the material that they were monitoring was a simulation of an Apollo launch, and so they were looking at telemetry?
I'm talking about all of those ground crews, all of those TV screens, and all those guys sitting that you see.
Reading telemetry and staring at screens. Okay.
They had computer programs to simulate everything: fuel consumption, perspiration of the astronaut, distance from the moon, and they went over it over and over and over again. And then they had a satellite to actually simulate the triangulation of signals coming from the moon, the Tetra satellite. Now, a few months before Apollo 11, they claimed that the satellite crashed into the ocean and burned up.
Okay.
So that way it could secretly still be up there, simulating transmissions from the moon. They could also bounce signals off of the moon to make them appear as if they're coming from the moon.
So nobody at the Johnson Space Center, nobody at Cape Canaveral, nobody anywhere that was monitoring this telemetry coming back wouldn't know, because it's the exact same telemetry used for practice, for rehearsal of every single aspect of Apollo. I just want to be clear as to what you're saying. And in addition to that, it was only actually scanned from the sky by NASA, and then it was fed through phone lines to the various sectors of the country and people around the world. So that data could easily be monkeyed with, and they would have, no doubt. They would not be able to tell. Now, the Soviet Union probably found out
through deduction of them not being able to go to the moon and how could these guys get so far advanced so quickly, and through espionage, that the moon landings were fake. But here's the thing. If I had a picture of the president with a prostitute, I could release that for free to the media and ruin him. Or I could blackmail him year after year for millions and millions and millions and millions of more dollars. And that's what the Soviet Union and perhaps China and Israel chose to do when they found out that the moon landings were fake. They held that information and decided to blackmail us over who knows what negotiations over trade or currency or oil or nuclear arms or bases or whatever else.
Okay, well, that's getting a bit out there for right now. Well, let's get to that, and that's a little bit. I want to lead up to that. Well, no, I hear you.
I'm saying if the Soviets found out the moon landings were fake, it would be more in their interest to not tell the world. They would get more mileage out of it, more benefit out of it, if they kept it a secret and used it as a negotiation tool with the United States.
Didn't they have, when I say they, I'm referring to the Chinese, Israel, Great Britain, certainly the Soviets. Didn't they have isn't there a system of tracking what is out there? I mean, obviously today we can track whatever, asteroids and comets, and we know what's coming and going, or we're supposed to, at least. But was there a way of tracking through triangulation? Was there a way to track somebody else's launches?
I don't think it was easily done back during the 1960s. I would say that equipment likely exists. It would make it much easier to do today.
Right.
Again, a lot of this data was always controlled by the government and then fed to people and assumed to be authentic. Even the TV images were projected onto a projection screen. So you got to imagine the quality of projection TV in 1969, and then the networks were told to film the TV image off of a projection screen.
Yeah, I had heard that. And I want, I want you to explain a little bit deeper. I don't want to gloss over this because this is something that's very, 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 very important. So this is what I had heard. You had just said it there, but that there wasn't an actual high def, standard def feed that was going out to the networks. They were told by NASA to set up a camera and point the camera at a second generation projection screen, not even cathode ray, but a projection screen, some distorted blown up image. And that is what we saw on television. That's what I saw on television live.
And then if you wanted to archive it, you would film that image off of a TV screen, and that was what most people archived.
Why would they do it that way? That doesn't even...
Well, because they were fake sets, and they wanted to make sure nobody figured it out. It was the first time they had faked it, and they didn't want to show too much detail. I mean, I think it was 1967 when Bewitched, I Dream of Jeannie, and Gilligan's Island went from black and white to color. So if you're really going to the moon for the first time, you know how the Olympics game have 4G TV,
sure,
or 20G, whatever the latest thing is that won't be out for 20 years.
Right.
They would have had color TV if they were really on the moon, high definition. But they chose to use the low definition black and white camera and make it suffer through 4 generations of copying before it went out because they were fake sets. And they wanted to make sure that too much detail was not revealed. They deliberately degraded the quality of the TV image. And then when Ron Howard, about 10 years ago, maybe a little less than that, did an IMAX 70-millimeter film about Apollo. I mean, the whole thing is about the Apollo missions. And if you put a stopwatch on it, only about 5% or less of the movie is actual footage from the Apollo missions. And most of that is reenactments. And sometimes the image is shrunk to like 20% of the potential screen, and you even see a VHS tracking line at the bottom because that was the only copy available of it. What had happened is Ron Howard, for the production of this film, went to NASA and asked for the original, I think they're called DLT tapes. They're like 2-inch digital videotapes, sort of. They're a digital transposition of an analog signal. And, I would estimate there were probably 1 ton to 2 tons worth of these videotapes. There's only one machine that can, copy them over to high resolution, and he made that request. It had never been done before. And between the time of his request and 6 weeks later, they lost every single original videotape from the National Archives of the Apollo missions for the television images. Now, that's tons, 2 or 3 tons of videotapes lost from the National Archives. Now, we have a copy of the Declaration of Independence. It's more than 200 years old, and so we can't keep the originals. They're lost. And then just to make sure, they immediately disassembled and threw away the only machine that could ever read the tapes if they were ever found.
Wait. Are you okay?
Mm-hmm.
Have the tapes? Okay, now so have the tapes ever been recovered?
No, they've been lost for going on 10 years now.
And the machine that, even if they were found, the video playback, the digital machine that plays back that digital audio and video, it doesn't exist either.
No, they deliberately destroyed it so that if the tapes were found, they could never be. What we're talking about is a minimum of 4 times the resolution of the Apollo TV images that had ever been seen. Now, it's my opinion that there may have been 2 sets. There may have been a still picture set, which was of higher quality, for the high resolution 35 millimeter pictures they allegedly took on the moon, and a separate set, which was circular, for television. They basically had a set about the size of maybe one of those fuel drums out at the airport. And in order to do a panoramic 360, degree field, they had the fake backdrop painted or projected around the inside. They had the landscape, going around. They lowered, the equipment by a crane and then put the astronauts in there. And because it was, not that high quality of a set, that's why they made it, 4 times generation for a copy of a copy 4 times. So we would see it at least 4 times, possibly more, with digital enhancements and things like that. You would see it at super, super duper resolution, and you would probably see the backdrop, the curvature of the landscape, in the circular set, and who knows what else.
Well, I had always thought that the reason why it wasn't in color was a bandwidth issue, and the size of the cameras that would have to be up on the moon, they would be, just too big and oversized. That's the way my brain works, my tiny brain. And that was the get out of jail free card that they had on that issue for me. But you raise a really good point. That back then, but let me finish. That back then, I'm not cutting you off. I just want to get my thought out. But back then, color was a big deal. And I don't know if you were alive back then, but I was. And I remember when Gilligan's Island went from black and white to color. I remember when the Flintstones went from black and white to color. It was a big deal. And every network, that's why the NBC Peacock was multicolored. That's all they wanted to do was tout the latest and greatest thing, which was color television. And the greatest event of mankind being, landing on the moon, why wasn't that in color? And I always thought it was for different reasons. That's an amazing thought that you put out there, not only for me but for everybody else. I never considered it.
Yeah, just like, if Buzz really went to the moon and I asked him to swear on a Bible and challenged him, he would find it funny. If they really went to the moon, Nixon himself would have been at the launch, but he didn't show up until like the 4th Apollo mission after he knew he could get away with faking it. And he didn't want to have a picture of him shaking the hands of the astronauts and the whole thing to unravel. And, of course, if they were really on the moon, they would have had a color camera, high resolution, to show off. Not only can we go to the moon, we can do it in color. We can do it in stereo. Look how great we are. You know what I mean? But it was the first time they faked it. So they had to be very careful the way that they faked it.
Now,
who knew they would get away with it? Now, they did get away with it, but it was risky. So they wanted to make sure the TV pictures weren't too high res to make sure they get away with fooling people.
There are so many facts that we're going to start to present here, and I want to start with one of the most fascinating ones before we get to the footage that you discovered and the overlays on the windows. We'll get to that because that needs a whole explanation, and that's going to take up a big chunk of the show. So before we get to that, do you have your computer up and running? Are you looking at your gallery?
I can.
Okay. Well, you know the photograph I want everybody to look at. So on the top row of the gallery, picture number 4 is labeled Armstrong 1. So everybody go right now, because this is a very, very, probably to me, one of the most important photographs ever taken for this evidence, and there's reasons for it. Now, this is, and now I'm hoping everybody is looking at the picture now. Actually, after they hear what you have to say about this picture, it's the only picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon. Now, why, when you consider that, this is the thing. When Buzz Aldrin, we think of his name, yeah, Gene Cernan, yeah, okay, there's other names, like Michael Collins, there's other names that come to mind when you think about the original guys, that went up. We do. But the king is Neil Armstrong. He was first, he's the most famous, but also he's the one that we know nothing about. And you would have thought, just like you were saying now, with color pictures and the documentation of everything else, that we would have hundreds, if not thousands, of pictures of Neil Armstrong on the moon. There's only one, and it's this one right here, isn't it?
Yeah. I went to the archives and I said, find me a picture, a still picture. We're not talking about television. We're talking about still photography of Neil Armstrong on the moon. And they went through every single Apollo 11 picture. And to their own astonishment, there was not a picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon. This is actually taken from what's called an automatic sequence camera, which is a 16 millimeter camera that takes like one picture a second or something like that. And so this, theoretically isn't even a real still image. Now, the excuse is that Armstrong was taking the pictures, therefore he's not in them. But I would think if you're going to the moon for the first time and it's 250 degrees in the sun and minus 250 in the shade, which is a 500-degree difference, and there's micrometeorites and who knows what else, I think you might want to bring a backup camera just in case, you know what I mean? And so I would probably put a camera on each astronaut, but they chose not to do that. Now, I've studied Neil Armstrong, his background quite a bit and talked to people from his hometown. He was an extremely outgoing people person until he returned from the mission and totally changed his behavior. And he was the life of the party. He played the piano, and he was just everybody's friend and very outgoing personality. And everybody says he completely changed his demeanor when he came back from the moon and, refuses to be interviewed about it. His own neighbors didn't even know until I went there with the film crew who they lived next to. His own postman didn't even know who lived there. He says, yeah, I'm delivering to Neil Armstrong, but not the Neil Armstrong. I'm like, yeah. And
this is my point, and I want you to finish your thought, but this is dramatic. If we didn't have this picture here, and I'm talking about the United States, the world, if we, the world, didn't have this picture, that we've got nothing of Neil on the moon, that doesn't make any sense. And if you went to the moon, if I went to the moon, man, if I go to Disneyland, I'm going up to Mickey Mouse and getting my picture taken with Mickey Mouse. It's what you do. And he goes to the moon, and you're telling me, and I mean NASA, is telling me that Neil didn't take any pictures? He didn't make sure that he wasn't shot next to the LM? He wasn't shot? Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense.
Here's why, in my opinion. The man, prior to participating in this, was a man of extremely high integrity. And I suspect that when they asked him to fake the moon landing, he wished them luck, but said he didn't want to have anything to do with it. Unfortunately, it was already chosen on the world stage through the media that he was going to be the guy. So if he resigned, people would start asking questions. Why are you going to resign? Are you chicken, or what's going on?
Of course,
and
of course.
So they would not let him resign. So if you ask a guy to do it and he says no, and then you bribe him with money, and then he says no, and then the guy has such integrity, there's nothing you can blackmail him for. You have to keep turning up the heat, you see. Now, if you threaten his life, you got to remember he's a test pilot, and he flies aircraft that has never been flown before, which is extremely dangerous. So I don't think if you threatened his life, that's going to mean a whole lot.
No, he stared death in the face. It was his job. Yeah, exactly.
So you have to turn up the heat more. And what is left? You threaten the life of his wife and of his children. Then you get his cooperation. The secret tape I found, if someone said, "Hey, we're going to kill your son unless you give it back to us, Bart," I would say, "Here it is."
Right.
And that's what he did. He said, "I'll do it to protect my family." But he didn't want to have anything to do with it afterwards. That's why he looked so unhappy at the one press conference. That's why he seldom gave interviews about it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. And he made sure that he did not have his picture taken during it because he found it disgusting. And I think he also might have considered it some form of protection of liability as well. But I pointed out to him, there's a plaque that he signed his name to saying he did walk on the moon.
One of the things that is very stunning in your documentary, and there's a lot of it there. By the way, who does the narration? What's her name?
Her name is Ann Tonelson. Again, if your listeners go to Sibrel, Sibrel.com, and then go to the YouTube link, it's one of the films on there. And then can watch it. It's only like 45 minutes long.
Yeah. The link, they just have to click on your name, Bart. It's a new technology. Yeah. It's called a hyperlink. It's going to be the next big thing. Yeah, it's going to be the next big thing on the internet. But she does a really great job in the narration. She's really, really, really good. I wish I would have been able to narrate it, but you know what? You pick second best. She's amazing. She does such a great job. So anyway, when she explained, when the part, it's one of the most astounding parts of the documentary is the initial press conference when they're sitting there. Not one of those three, not one, was happy. Not one of they look like, and especially Neil Armstrong. And you don't think about it because your memory's clouded, and you don't go back and study these things. And until YouTube and modern internet, you didn't have a way to just go back and look at that footage again, or would you have a reason to? But if you go back now, with this mindset, and you go back and you look at Neil Armstrong, it looks like somebody put a gun to his head and forced him out on that stage. He did not want to be there. He did not want to answer the questions. He wanted to get out of there, and he wanted to move on with it. You could just tell that he was disconnected. Instead of, where's the enthusiasm? When you see the shuttle pilots come back, everybody is jacked up and happy and want to talk and what was it like and weightless this and love that and this. You know what I mean? But that press conference is depression central. And I'm not wrong, am I?
No. 4 out of 5 people who watch A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, who previously thought the moon landings were real, reversed their opinion, of about 2,000 people that we polled. And of that group who now believe we did not go, asked them, well, what's the most significant piece of evidence? 4 out of 5 say that new footage that I uncovered that shows them faking a shot right in front of your eyes. But 1 out of 5 of those say their expressions during the press conference.
Right.
They literally look like they're at a funeral of their only son.
Yes. Yeah. And
Buzz, none of them wants to talk. They keep passing the buck.
Yep.
They just look like the most sour, depressed because they're telling this huge lie.
They're
to the
lying.
detriment
Yes.
Of their own character. They know it's bad. They know they're doing wrong. They know they shouldn't be doing it. They know it's a disgusting thing to be doing. They know it while they're doing it, and you can see it so clearly.
I should have today. I should have pulled some stills from that press conference, and I was very busy. But everybody else here, working on the show, the one thing that we're talking about now that was so astounding, I didn't get to it. But again, everybody, just the links are up to go to Bart's site, and you can check it out, and go to YouTube and check it out for yourself. And when you get to that press conference, you will remember, after hearing Bart and I talk about it, trust me on this, it's going to freak you out. Well, look at Buzz Aldrin, how he's looking down at the table and he's flipping through paper and he's just so disconnected. He's not listening to the questions. And that whole, did you see stars sequence? And you look at everybody kind of look at each other like they needed to keep their story straight. And you know what's funny? And again, I could be way wrong, but it was just like, what do we say when they ask us about the stars? You say you didn't see stars. And that's your answer.
Here's something I noticed about the press conference.
Hey, Bart, we got a couple of calls coming in. You want to take a quick live call?
Let me say one. Yeah, we'll do that. Let me say one last thing about the press conference.
Okay.
I edited a DVD of it, of just the press conference from the two angles. I spent 100 hours on it, and like at about hour 80, I noticed something. So I'm a filmmaker, I'm an editor, and after 80 hours, I finally saw something that was there in front of me all along, which was they have teleprompters that are recessed into their desk they're sitting at to prompt them with answers. Now, if these are the only people who have been to the moon on the entire planet, why do they need to be prompted to give answers about an experience that is solely only belongs to them?
And only they not only belongs to them, but we want to hear it. We want to hear their color commentary. All right,
they were being prompted with the teleprompter, or what to say secretly.
Let's grab this call really quick. Hello, caller. You're live on the air right now with Bart Sibrel.
Hello. I wrote Bart an email today, and I wrote you one yesterday, Jimmy.
Okay.
When I was growing up, had some close ties to some higher-ups in NASA through a sibling that dated some very important people. She even had a moon rock, a so-called moon rock, which there's so many complex things that happened down the road. Eventually, her house got broken into. That was one of the few things that was stolen. It was in her jewelry box, along with metal emblems from different space flights that was given to her by one of the public affairs people of NASA, who's written books and everything, and was very deeply involved in Apollo. And then the guy stole that and some jewelry with all their guns, and then got in a shootout with the police and ended up on death row, which is pretty strange. But in the early 60s, one of the big wheels was from our area, and he came to the house all the time. He was dating my sister at the time, and I was a kid, and he would bring me all the photographs and stuff. And my father was real involved in politics and very savvy, and had worked at the project at Oak Ridge and knew a lot of stuff that was going the way the government worked. Well, they'd announced moon shot in 62 or 63, and he was there saying, "Oh my God, we cannot do this. This is impossible." He was talking out of his mind, and nobody, had cleared that to happen.
Right.
And he said that he said there's going to be trouble to pay.
What's your?
Gus Grissom dropped that. He said that Grissom will be wiped out because of this, which he was later. And I think Grissom was going to talk because he was one of the real ballsy ones there. Now, I think that is one of the biggest points that tells you this is a complete, utter lie.
And we were actually gonna get to that too as well, because I think that's a great point. Really quick, did you have a question really quick for Bart?
I didn't know you're from Tennessee. Do get a hold of me, Bart. I can tell you hours of stories of the things I've heard and things that they did in the earlier space flights. Like one of the things, they put a frog in there with one of the astronauts, and it really caused some bad problems.
Okay, well,
I don't know if that ever became public or not, but it's amazing what they couldn't do at the time.
You know,
and they knew they couldn't do this.
Okay, thank you.
But don't you think though that the biggest issue of all is the fact there's no way to have powered the capsule up there and back. We couldn't do it now unless we used a small nuclear reactor, and you couldn't shield it. Shield that part of it. Just to do the power for the heating and cooling would take such an amount of power, and we sure didn't have the technology then to do that. Enjoying the show very much.
Oh, thank you. Those are all great points. Thank you, caller. Thank you for that. What was your?
Jimmy.
Okay, bye. Bart, I would have brought up all of these questions. I have a bunch of calls stacked up. You want to take one more?
Sure.
One more quick one? Okay, here we go. Okay, you're live on the air. Who's calling?
Hey there, this is Mark from Santa Fe. How are you guys doing tonight?
Hey, Mark, how you doing?
I'm doing great.
Okay, you got a question? For Bart, real quick?
Yeah, I just wanted to play devil's advocate for a second, and as far as the guys looking, really forlorn in the video when they're being interviewed.
Have you seen the video?
It all depends on how we color it, right? So if you say that they're telling this lie and I'm watching the video and I have that in my head, then it makes sense. Like, oh my gosh, they're totally upset about it. But for all we know, Buzz could have been sleeping with Neil's wife, and that news had broken to them, right before they went on and had this interview. And if you look at it that way, it's like, we don't know what exactly happened. They could have gotten into a fight with each other right before they went on. They could have been on tour for, and talking about this with other people, or up for the past 24 hours. Someone could have found out they had cancer. For all we know, that's why everybody's looking upset.
Now, I'm going to
point I wanted to bring up.
Okay, that's a great point. And I'll stop you there. Thank you for the call, Mark, by the way.
Yeah. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you. He brings up a great point, but and then Bart, I want your reaction to this, but this is my point of view. Let's just play devil's advocate there. That's fine. But after the Super Bowl and those athletes are coming in doing their press conference and they just won the game, the fact that somebody else on that team is sleeping with his wife is not on somebody's mind. They're talking about the game. They're talking about the big game. They're happy. They're fired up. And Mark, if you're listening right now, please, that's the way I look at it. Those guys just completed, supposedly, allegedly, the greatest achievement in the history of man. And they look like their puppies were just run over by cars in the street.
Yeah, you have to look at the context, and the context was the things that he proposed didn't happen. What did happen was they allegedly came back from the moon victorious and survived. That would certainly make me happy. It would be hard to not be happy under those circumstances, unless, of course, it was a forgery and they were forced to lie about it. I mean, lying to the scientific community, lying to all of your citizens, lying to Congress, lying to the Senate, lying to your wife, lying to your children,
right?
Lying to school teachers, lying to pilots, lying to the whole world.
Now, let's get to
how depressing that would be.
Well, let's get to exactly. Okay, now let's get to some black and white stuff, and then we'll get to the footage because that's a key thing here. But the one thing that everybody it constantly brings up when they talk about this is how could we keep 400,000 people quiet? There were so many contractors and engineers and so many different companies involved in building, and it was impossible. There's just no way to keep it so silent and so secret for so long. So I want your reaction to that. But the one thing, and I don't want you to miss this point, is the Manhattan Project. We kept that secret, didn't we?
Well, they did it through departmentalization. They had different people building a particular component, and they really didn't know what the component was for, like the kill switch or the on switch or the wiring or this or that or the other. And they didn't know, except a few people who saw the whole picture. They did the same thing during Apollo. You know, that seems like it's always the easiest question to throw out there, but it's extremely superficial because you're right. You can't keep a secret among 400,000 people. So guess what? You didn't tell the 400,000 people. You really think you're going to tell the guy who makes the door or the glove or the boot or the helmet, hey, by the way, the moon missions are fake. Keep it a secret. I mean, of course they're not going to say. You think they're stupid?
Right.
They're going to tell as few people as possible. All the ground crews. I mean, you're a ground crew sitting at a console. You think you would know whether it was fake or not, but a guy admitted he could not tell if it was fake or not. A guy said, I was there, and you could tell no difference between a simulation and an actual flight. We were just reading data on a screen that was either live, if it were real, or from a computer program, if it were a simulation. And we could tell no difference whatsoever. So very few people knew. The president and his cabinet knew, and von Braun knew, and the astronauts knew, and maybe even the flight director didn't know, and the people who built the sets. But when you're at that level of secrecy as part of your day-to-day life, year after year after year, and you sign an oath, you'll go to jail or be executed. If you break an oath, you keep the secret.
Well, the point about
easy.
The point about the telemetry coming back, that certainly covers a huge amount of people. If they assume that what they are reading is the real thing, because technically it is the real thing. It's just not the telemetry that they think that they're looking at. You know, it's coming from a satellite feed. So that makes sense, and that would cover a lot of bases. All you need to really do is get the rocket off the launch pad. Let everybody see that. From there on out, we don't know. The only three people that know the truth are the ones that are in that capsule.
It was the only important event in history that had no independent eyewitnesses and no independent press coverage whatsoever. I mean, people who say, well, if you believe the moon landings are fake, then you believe the Holocaust was fake. And I said, no, the Holocaust and World War II was done in front of about 1 billion eyewitnesses.
Right.
But the moon landing only had 3 eyewitnesses and a TV picture completely controlled by the Nixon administration. I mean, there's no way to check it. There's no way to verify it. It's assumed that they're telling the truth. It's assumed that they're on the moon. It's assumed that the data my computer is getting is real. But you have to realize that's how criminals get away with it, by tricking people. People embezzle money all the time and get away with it because they trick people. People can be fooled. And Hitler himself said it's actually easier to get away with a big lie than a small one. He said people tell small lies all the time, and they're expected. But no one would anticipate the audaciousness of a big lie, and that's why you can easily get away with a big lie.
How did you? Let's get to the fun stuff. Well, the fun stuff is the astronauts. We're going to get to
None
that.
of it's fun, Jimmy. None of it's fun, really. It's depressing. You know what I mean?
Like I said, it's a difficult.
They really didn't go to the moon. It's pathetic. It's pathetic that our country, that used to be great, has now as its national heroes a bunch of liars.
They
give Congressional Medal of Honor to liars. They give a Medal of Honor to a liar who's known for lying. His accomplishment is a lie, and they have the audacity to give him the Medal of Honor. That's our country. That is pathetic. It is so pathetic that the media is so manipulated and public consciousness is so manipulated that they get away with faking the moon landing. It is pathetic.
Well,
Because
you know,
when
the media's, you know, to back the media up, and I am the media too, is they only know what they're being told. So it's not like they're participating in the lie. You know, they are doing what they should do, which is cover a spectacular event. But is it sad? Totally sad. Not the media's fault. It's not anybody else's fault. It was.
Well, I think you made a good point. They are kind of like unwitting pawns.
Right.
At the same time, there should be critical thinking about it. In the film Capricorn 1, which you may have seen about a fake Mars landing.
Love the movie. Yeah.
It's a great movie, whether they went to the moon or not. It's brilliant.
Right.
And so Elliot Gould is kind of like me. He worked for an NBC affiliate. I worked for an NBC affiliate. He was fired for working on the story. I was fired for working on the story. Can you believe it? The scoop of the century. And finally, when they got a new news director in, because the guy who fired me was caught doing cocaine or something, the new news director, when I showed him the footage that we didn't go to the moon, he practically fainted, turned white, and peed in his pants and collapsed in his chair and looked like he'd seen a ghost. He said, "My God, Bart, it looks like we didn't go to the moon." I said, "Yeah, what do we do?" He thought about it and said, "I cannot air this with a clear conscience. It would cause a civil war, and I don't want to be responsible for that." So NBC News got this footage in my film. They agreed that it proved we didn't go to the moon, and they refused to air it.
Where did you get the footage?
A source at NASA gave it to me.
Okay. Where did you get the footage?
Well, I got it from the Johnson Space Center in Houston.
Okay.
And from a source who gave it to us. I got more than one tape of significance. There's some that's not in the movie. We have a shot of alleged lunar orbit with the moon going by at allegedly 4,000 miles an hour because it's shot from the command module, allegedly. And then the moon stops and the camera adjusts top to bottom, left to right, and then it starts back up again, proving it's a model.
Why did they give you Mr. X?
Well, Bill Casey had contacts there, and he believed they found out what I was up to and decided to help out. I just told them I was doing a documentary about the moon landings, and they assumed it was because I believe we went. But that wasn't the case. I asked them to send me everything they had from just the first mission. I figured if they faked it, they're more likely to have made a mistake the first time they faked it. And in fact, you may not know this, but Apollo 12, a minute and a half into the mission, the camera allegedly accidentally, in quotes, pointed at the sun, and there was no TV pictures for the rest of the mission. Apollo 13, which is totally contrived to bring drama back into it, they didn't go either. So the time between Apollo 11 and Apollo 14, the next time we saw images on the moon, was a 2-year span. A 2-year span to improve their images or hire a new director or train new people on how to fake it.
Wait. That's almost too much to digest. You're saying because of a comedy of errors or whatever, or excuses or whatever, technical issues or whatever, that between Apollo 11 and Apollo, did you say 15? Let me get this right.
No, it's 14.
14.
They went to the moon.
There's no footage of 12 after the launch. There's
no
footage,
TV footage on the moon, because the astronaut allegedly mistakenly pointed the camera at the sun.
Right. So Apollo 12, we know what happened to 13. Apollo 13, right? So
that means between Apollo 11 and Apollo 14, which were the two times there was a lot of live TV allegedly coming from the moon, they had 2 years to get their act together. Because as you, I'm sure, are going to bring up later, Kubrick probably shot Apollo 11, but had nothing whatsoever to do with it after that.
Right.
So they had a 2-year window to get their act together and figure out the brilliant way that he did it and try to imitate him. I
hadn't thought of that, but you're absolutely right. There isn't any. 12 is 12. There's nothing there. 13 is 13. So then, for that 2.5 year period, there's nothing. That's and the leap in technology that happened between 69 and 71, 72 was tremendous. Wow, that's a great point.
Well, and it was also already burned in. For example, let's say you're in town. I say, "Hey, Jimmy, let me take you out to the best restaurant in Nashville." They put your steak on the table right in front of you, and then this cockroach crawls across your plate.
Okay.
Now, it didn't touch the steak. You can still eat the steak. The dessert's great. The service is great. But what do you remember about the dinner?
Right.
And if I say 10 years later, hey, let's go back to that restaurant, what do you remember? You remember the cockroach. It's burned in there. Well, in a positive way, when people saw it on TV, they're on the moon, it burned it in there as acceptance. It burned a groove in people's minds. So actually, they could have made the picture quality less and still gotten away with it psychologically because people had already accepted that man can go to the moon. You see, and that's what we're trying to take away from people. We're trying to take away this burned image in their mind, in their pride, in their emotions, in their patriotism, and they don't want to let go of it. You know, there's a video out on YouTube called Truth or Tradition. It's about whether we should be keeping pagan holidays or the original feast days, the Catholic Sabbath of Sunday or the real Sabbath of Saturday.
Right.
And I like that title, Truth or Tradition. You see, and Jesus said the same thing. He said, you people have let go of the commands of God and are following your own tradition. And here we are, not wanting the truth, which is we didn't go to the moon, we lied about it. But we're in love with the tradition that we did go, and America's great, and we beat the Soviets. We love tradition more than the truth. We love the lie more than the truth. That's sad.
Well, let's get to the truth. Let's get to the first set of photographs on the top row, everybody, so you can understand what we're talking about. Now, I'm going to set up what we're looking at, and it's picture number 2 and picture number 3 in the top row. And Bart, I hope that you're looking at the same set of photographs, but and I'm going to let Bart take away in a second what we're looking at. But to set this up, in the command module, the camera is shooting out a window and is shooting back to planet Earth. Now, there's two things that occur here. One, we've got distance from the Earth to the moon and where they are in space. There's that aspect. But the other thing is, in one set of footage, they are using an overlay of Earth that is being placed over the window, and they have to darken. Well, anyway, so that's one set. And the other one is that they're trying to make Earth look farther away or closer than it really is for this broadcast and for this documentation. So that's the footage that you found. You busted them with this overlay, and also somebody's arm passes in front of the camera when the camera's supposed to be up against the glass on the ship, because that's what they said, not what you said, Bart, not what I said. It's what they said. And next, I have the audio queued up, by the way, and I want you to set up the cue for the audio. So let's go to picture number 1. Picture number 1 is the arm getting ready to pass in front of the Earth. And then picture number 2 is overlay number 2. So let's go to picture number 1, Bart. What are we looking at? Now, for everybody out there, this is picture number 2 in the top row. You're looking at Earth, and it's being cut off on the left side. And I see the arm hair, by the way, Bart. What are we looking at?
Well, basically, at this footage that I received was unedited. I specifically asked for unedited footage, but everything was already whitewashed and put together. And, there was no unedited footage except this and one other reel, which we were not supposed to get. At the beginning of the reel, when you pop it in, it says on the screen, do not show to the public. And it's the only unedited reel. And so being an editor, I hit fast forward just to kind of scan it. So it's going by about 20 times normal speed or so. And I see this shot for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, for an hour. And I'm like, oh, this is unedited footage. Let me just go back and listen to the top of it. And what it's supposed to be is the Earth floating in space. At this point in the mission, and of course, we hear the astronaut's audio explaining the shot for the TV viewers. Mind you, they only aired about 20 seconds of it, and we have the unedited version. He says, this is Neil Armstrong calling in from about 130,000 miles out, which is halfway to the moon. They say they only have one window that faces the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera, meaning the camera's blocking the window because the lens, of course, would have to be at the glass to shoot the tiny Earth far away. If you actually go to the second row and the picture first to the left without clicking on it, without expanding it, that's kind of the look that they wanted. A blackness of space with that little blue. You see the blue is similar. That's allegedly the Earth floating in space.
Got you.
The top 2 or 3 pictures in the first row are kind of a zoom in, allegedly, of the Earth floating in space. Now, we have the unedited version of it, which shows the camera is not up against the glass like they claim. The camera is actually at the very back of a coupled spacecraft, so it's 10 to 15 feet away from the glass. And they've turned out all the lights, and they block sunlight from entering so that the inside is pitch black, all of which they talk about because they thought these conversations would be edited out. Now, they never aired this footage, but basically this is just a 1-foot model of the Earth. This is a circular window. You know how spacecraft and spaceships or ships in the ocean, they have circular windows. Well, this is actually a circular window of the spacecraft in Earth orbit. Now, you're either seeing a section of the Earth outside of the window, or it's simply being backlit, and they have a transparency, kind of like a big slide, a foot across,
right,
shot of the Earth, shot from an unmanned probe in Earth orbit where they, dropped a canister with the film in it. But basically, this is a 1-foot model of the Earth. It's the only fake shot that the astronauts shot themselves because it's supposed to be coming from the spacecraft. They were on the rocket. They had to go up in front of witnesses, and they had to splash down in front of witnesses, and they needed Earth orbit for the zero gravity footage. But beside that, they never left Earth orbit. That's why they knew nothing about the Van Allen radiation belt, because they never went through it.
Right.
And so they have to pretend to be even halfway to the moon because they cannot leave Earth orbit. And as you know, the Apollo missions were the only space mission in world history by any nation at any time that claimed to leave Earth orbit. Now, they're faking being halfway to the moon, which means they couldn't go halfway. And if they can't go halfway, they certainly couldn't go all the way. And because all the equipment from all the missions was identical, if Apollo 11's equipment can't leave Earth orbit, it means none of them did. They faked it each time. What you're seeing is an outtake of where there's an astronaut between the circular window and the camera, and his arm, you can see the hair on his arm in the third picture, first row, getting in front of the camera. And if you click on the first picture to the left on the second row and expand it, you'll even see a work light, a part of the interior wall of the spacecraft. Again, this is a circular window of the spacecraft. So either that's a big UFO, outside of Earth, or this is a model of the Earth. Of course, all of this is shown in real time. If you just go to Sibrel.com, click on the YouTube channel and watch A Funny Thing, you'll see this in real time. And I've shown it to people, and they gasp when they see this. I mean, this
when
is
Mitchell, when Mitchell, I've just got to tell you my reaction to this. When Mitchell sees this, when you show him this in his living room, I'm assuming that's his house. And when he sees this, he cannot believe what he's seeing. He starts falling apart emotionally because he realizes what the footage is and what it proves. Now, not only that, when I rewound the tape and played it from the beginning, I believe this is the audio clip you have queued up. Right.
We hear they're basically seeing this blue image, and then we hear NASA say, "Hey, Goldstone tells us that the TV picture looks great," meaning NASA doesn't even have the TV picture. Then there's 4 seconds of dead air. Then you hear on a third channel talk. Now, the NASA voiceover is kind of like through a radio, has that crackly sound. And then when Neil Armstrong responds, it also kind of sounds like it's through a radio. But the talk is crystal clear right on top of a microphone wherever this is being recorded. Again, you're going to hear NASA first say the TV picture looks great.
Right.
There's going to be 4 seconds of dead air. You're going to hear a third party, the CIA, tell Neil Armstrong, talk, and then he starts speaking. Now, the narration in the film, I said, well, he wasn't paying attention, and that was what the talk was for. But after the film came out, I realized what it was really for. He's supposed to be halfway to the moon. And because of all the old analog equipment and the distance and the speed of light, it would have taken at least 2 seconds for him to hear the question from NASA and 2 seconds for the answer to come back, which is 4 seconds.
Right.
So someone at the CIA, after NASA, asked him a question, counted off 4 seconds, and waited and then said talk, because if he responded right away, it would give away the fact that he was still in Earth orbit. And
and why? If it's all true, right? If it's all true, then why say talk?
Well, exactly. According to NASA,
that's the giveaway.
According to NASA, there's only 2 people on the channel, NASA and the astronauts.
Right.
Now, there's a company called Spacecraft Films that released part of the window shot footage to kind of diffuse that it meant anything, saying, well, we're going to release some of the same footage to prove that it doesn't mean anything. Well, you know what they do? They delete talk at the very beginning of the clip. They took it out.
So let's roll, Bart.
They took it out.
I know.
Well, if it means nothing, why did they delete it?
Exactly. So let's roll. I'm going to roll the audio right now. It's going to come up really quick because I'm right in front of the narration part. So here we go, and we can play it again. That's not a problem. But this is what we're talking about. Everybody give this a good listen. I've got it cranked up. And just listen for talk. Listen to Armstrong, but then when you hear talk, you're going to get it in the context of what Bart is talking about. So here we go.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger.
You see, so Neil Armstrong had an earpiece on, and this bled over on this particular channel, on this particular reel at the beginning of it by accident. And they didn't intend on it being recorded on the tape that I got, but it was. You hear NASA speak, you hear 4 seconds go by, then you hear talk. Basically, he's not allowed to speak until he hears talk, to make sure that he remembers to not answer after 4 seconds go by. Otherwise, it'll give away the fact that his radio distance is much closer to Earth than he really is.
It's a really big deal. I want to play it one more time for everybody. Okay, so just here we go.
Speaks.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, Roger.
It's an amazing moment.
It was an amazing moment, Jimmy, when I heard it for the first time. I'm kind of reliving it now. I'm in my edit suite. I hear talk, and I'm thinking, what?
Right,
He's being prompted like an actor to speak. And then as I start looking at the footage, I'm like, that looks like the window, like a circular window. And I'm like, that's not the window. No, that's not the window. No, it can't be. Then the lights come up, and they actually hit the stop button. You can tell this flash where the manual button to circuit almost went through, but it popped back up and it kept recording inadvertently. And then you see that it's a 1 foot model. It's not the Earth floating in space. It's a 1 foot model of the Earth. I'm thinking, oh my God, wait a minute. They're faking being halfway to the moon. Wait a minute. What does that mean? That means they can't go halfway. And if they can't go halfway, oh my God. I must have said, oh my God, about 100 times in 2 minutes. I figured, they're African Americans who thought there would never be an African American president in their lifetime, and they were wrong. And I always thought, well, we'll never have any concrete proof while I was making this movie, whether we win or not. And then lo and behold, 3.5 years into this 5-year project, I find this tape and I'm thinking, oh my God, they really didn't go to the moon. They really didn't go. I started panicking.
Right.
I have proof that the moon landing is fake in my house. I called up Bill Casing. I said, Bill, we really didn't go to the moon. You know what he said? Well, Bart, I told you. And I said, yeah, but we really didn't go. It really was fake. Well, Bart, I told you.
Have you been, I've got a few questions I want to get to that have come in via email, so I want to bang out those really quick. But have you, any men in black come by the house? You got any surveillance vans, a laundry truck sitting across the street 24 hours a day? Anything like that?
I don't really talk about that on the record because it just sounds too bizarre, and it's already sounded bizarre enough. But if you'd like for me to go into detail about that privately, when we're off the air. Sure.
Well, that's all you need to
like
say. Oh, sure. It's to be expected. Okay, let's get to this first email. Here we go. This is from Chuck. Are physicists who claim to have studied the moon rocks, like Michio Kaku, are they also in on the conspiracy?
Well, I don't know whether he deliberately believes we went to the moon or is lying intentionally. Most of the people who defend the moon landing sincerely believe we went. You got to understand, 99.99999% of people at NASA were fooled themselves. The best way to fool the world is to fool NASA and fool the media. And they love these Boy Scouts on there who really believe we went to the moon because they're not lying. You can't detect that they're lying. Now, Von Braun, who was in charge of the project, went down to Antarctica. I mean, he took 6 months before they went to the moon for the very first time. He took a leisurely stroll. I guess they weren't in that big of a hurry to go to the moon, to go down to Antarctica, where he retrieved hundreds of pounds of lunar meteorites. Of course, this is how they either used as the moon rocks or simulated the moon rocks. And so, and not to mention, it's actually a federal crime to be in possession of a moon rock or moon dust, because that would really be independent, examination, like that the person did in Amsterdam. The Prime Minister of the Netherlands was given a moon rock personally by Neil Armstrong. Now, if Neil Armstrong is giving you a rock that he personally picked up on the moon and personally gives it to you, and they immediately seal it in a hermetically sealed box and presume it won't be open for 2,000 years, but a guy opens it anyway and finds out, well, the reason why it looks a little unique is because it's petrified wood. Now, unless trees are growing on the moon, it's a forgery.
Right.
And so, they can make anything happen that they want. What they really have, as proof is the moon rocks, allegedly according to them, which of course we know can be lunar meteorites or forgeries, or the testimony of the astronauts. That's it. I think one of the equations of science, whether you do cold fusion or whatever, is independent verification. Again, if I did cold fusion and you said, well, show me, and I said, well, I can't repeat it for 50 years. Would you really think I did it in the first place? And yet people still believe the moon landings are real. The South Pole has 200-mile-per-hour winds and is minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit in winter. And yet there are bases there because it's physically possible. If it were physically possible to go to the moon, there would be people there. China, the Soviet Union, Japan, India, somebody would be there at least once since the Nixon administration, but they're not there. It's so simple because it cannot be done. Technology does not go backwards.
Well, one of the interesting points, and I believe you brought it up in the documentary. I've read it in a few other spots, but the reason why there are no stars on the moon for us to see is because if we had a backdrop of stars in the background, that they would have gotten busted because somebody like yourself or me, some amateur astronomer, a real astronomer, somebody would have lined up the map in the background to the actual placement of the stars at that moment in time and said, this is wrong. So the only way around it is to not take pictures and not have the stars there so nobody gets busted. And I find that shocking because if I'm going to the moon, Bart, if I'm going to the moon, aren't I going to take pictures of the universe and galaxies from a vantage point that nobody has ever taken them from before, so we can come back and study with a nice cloudless, a cloudless sky, 200,000 miles closer than the Earth is, and no atmospheric interference whatsoever? And get out there with a telescope with a camera on it and start rapid firing pictures. Isn't that my first job that I'm going to do?
Yeah, they never took a telescope to the moon because they couldn't fake the constellations properly. So they just didn't talk about it. They took an automobile to the moon but not a telescope. Like you would really drive miles away from your only life support system. In the event the car breaks down, you wouldn't have enough oxygen to walk back. Like they're really going to do that.
Right.
And yet they would never take a telescope. Now they say there's no stars in the background with the astronauts because the aperture is mostly closed for the white spacesuits. Well, that's true. All they had to do is stand with the sun behind them, point it directly up at the sky, turn the aperture all the way open, and they could have taken pictures of the stars. But they never did it. In fact, in the press conference,
well, they could have stood in the They could have stood in the shadow of the lunar module.
That's true. They would have seen them, if not anywhere on the surface, certainly from the shadow of the lunar module.
Right.
Now, it was the only question that Neil Armstrong responded to at the press conference with, "I don't remember." He was asked about whether he saw the stars or not. He says, "I don't remember." If you watch it closely, immediately Buzz Aldrin flinches because he knows that's not the right answer.
Right.
And Michael Collins jumps in to cover for him and says, "I don't remember seeing any." But wait a minute. Michael Collins wasn't there.
Exactly. He wasn't on the surface of the moon, and it was the way that he shoots. He shoots him a look. He looks at Armstrong.
He wasn't there.
Right.
He wasn't there, and it gets even better, Jimmy. Get a transcript, the official transcript, which I have, of that press conference, and lightning strikes twice in the exact same place. First, on the video, Michael Collins says he was there on the moon when, oops, he wasn't. And then number two, there's a type error at that very moment, and they say Buzz said, "I don't remember seeing any." They now change it to where, because most people got the transcript, this is before YouTube,
right.
Most people got the transcript of it, so they said Buzz said, "I don't remember seeing any." Do you see that?
Do you have a copy of that? Do you have a copy of that?
I got it somewhere.
Okay, email it to me. I'll put that up on the site.
You could probably also find it on the archives. If you went to NASA archives, let me see what I've got in here.
Well, out of the guys that are alive, and just if I'm wrong here, who is still alive?
Most of them are still alive. There were 6 missions. And if you count Apollo 13, because that's a forgery too, because they allegedly orbited the moon, which they did not. In fact, in this unedited footage, when they're talking about faking this window shot, they say this is the way 10 did it. Apollo 10 allegedly orbited the moon, but obviously they were doing the same fake shot.
Right.
So no human has ever left Earth orbit. So anytime they claim to orbit the moon, even if they didn't land, those were fake missions as well. So we have at least walking on the moon. If you include Apollo 13, that's 7 missions. Times 3 is 21.
Right.
And maybe 5 or 6 or 7 of those people are dead. So most of them are alive. Interesting note, though, Bill Casey, before I hit the scene, was the number one, we didn't go to the moon guy. And he was one of Oprah Winfrey's first guests on her show. And after he was on the show, and after he was pleading with people, the American public, to open their eyes and reform the government, and he wrote a book about it, he gets a phone call from one of the astronauts, Apollo 15, James Irwin. So you can imagine my surprise as I've been tracking down the astronauts, right, knocking on their door.
Right.
You can imagine my surprise if I say, "Hold on a minute," I answer the phone, and it's Buzz Aldrin calling me, right?
Right.
So James Irwin calls him in 1991 in August, and said, "We need to have a serious talk about your accusations because I have become a born-again Christian."
Wait. He died in 91.
That's right. What the way it went down was this.
Or was it
Bill
92?
Casey,
okay, this is my brain.
I think it was August of 91.
Okay.
And so this is the way it went down. Bill Casey gets a call from the astronaut James Irwin, Apollo 15, who says they need to have a serious talk about his accusations about the moon landings being fake. He explains the reason why he's willing to talk is because he's become a born-again Christian. Then he goes on to say that he is concerned for his safety. And he suggests that Bill call him at a particular phone number 3 days from then. On that third day, James Irwin had a fatal heart attack.
Really?
That's exactly what went down. So Bill's phone was bugged, or the astronauts, or both of them. and they made sure that that guy didn't confess. That's why the Apollo 1 fire happened. Gus Grissom was going to be the first guy to walk on the moon, and he could not believe the ineptitude and the schedule slippages, and he was about to he was going over people's heads to protest, and he couldn't get anywhere because the higher-ups knew they weren't going to go to the moon anyway. So they had already achieved Earth orbit, and that's all they were going to do. So why bother fixing all the stuff that the guy was complaining about? See, at that point, they had not yet informed the astronaut. It was on a need-to-know basis, and they had not totally committed yet to faking the missions. So one day, Gus Grissom has an impromptu press conference without permission and affixes a lemon the size of a grapefruit, to the very top of the rocket and invites media in to take a picture of it. So here's the man who's going to be the first man to walk on the moon. And in the end of 1966, he has a press conference and he says, I think this rocket is a lemon. It's going nowhere. Weeks later, he burns alive on the ground. I've talked to his son, who's a 747 pilot. I've talked to his widow, and they assure me that that fire was set deliberately. They're 100% sure. They have forensic evidence that proves that the fire was set deliberately.
Out of all of the astronauts that went on the moon, and of course we know that Irwin had passed away a long time ago. Alan Shepard, and who else? P. Conrad. They passed away before you did the documentary. Neil Armstrong is in your documentary. So out of the guys that were alive, who didn't you talk to? Did you talk to Schmidt?
I don't think I did. We talked to 8 of them. We were, they try to avoid, at least some of them try to avoid the media. And so we felt good to track down about half of the living astronauts.
So there's 8 that are in the documentary. Let me look. I didn't even know. I should be more prepared than 1, 2, 3.
The follow-up one called Astronauts Gone Wild. But basically,
okay, there's 8 or 8 or 9. Hold on a minute here. There's Buzz. I
think there's 8 of them.
There's Buzz, Young, Armstrong, Mitchell, Warden. Oh, wait a minute. Who didn't walk on the moon here? Anders. Anders didn't walk on the moon. Okay, all right.
But the point is, they allegedly were on the spacecraft with him and orbiting the moon.
Yeah, I'm just trying.
I asked them to take an oath whether they orbited the moon or not.
Right.
I said in my thoughts. But here's an interesting thing. I even tried to find Neil Armstrong's ex-wife because he, at the time of the 30th anniversary, which was a lot of pressure on him, I think it was the 25th anniversary, he divorced his wife suddenly and married somebody 20 years younger than him. I tried to track down his first wife to see if maybe she knew anything, although I doubt he told her directly, but I bet she was aware of him getting strange phone calls and visits and things like that. She could not be found. We hired a private detective, spent thousands of dollars. She changed her Social Security number. The private detective was astonished. He said he's never, ever, in his years of being a private detective, found none of anybody successfully changed their Social Security number. But the wife of Neil Armstrong did, because she did not. She knew something was up and wanted to fade into the background. When Kubrick died, and I think that was in 1999, I remember the AOL homepage news, and the quote was, Kubrick dead at the age of 70, and his wife says, quote, there were no suspicious circumstances regarding his death. And that's an interesting thing to volunteer. That's like getting pulled over and saying, hey, officer, I had nothing whatsoever to do with that bank robbery. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think she knew that he was taken out. These guys, prior to me hitting the scene, they were taken out right at the age of 70 or months shy of it, as if it was a retirement age for them to make sure they didn't get senile or get cancer and have time to contemplate the meaning of life and have a deathbed confession. And so I think even Kubrick's wife said, we're cooperating, leave us alone. That's why she volunteered that. Nothing suspicious. I tried for 6 months contacting Scotland Yard, the autopsy. I could not get a copy of his autopsy. Could not get any information whatsoever regarding his death, how he was found, what he died of, what was his last meal. I couldn't get any questions answered about him.
Wow.
And so, these people are afraid. They're afraid of dying, of being killed, because look at the Apollo 1 fire. They were murdered, and all they had to do was say, "Do you want to end up the same way? You want your children to end up the same way?"
Exactly. And there's a couple of points that we need to drive home. Number one is that picture with Neil Armstrong being the only one of him on the moon, and the excuse because he's the supreme being, he's the guy. And he doesn't have a picture of himself posing on the moon. That's the first thing. But the second thing is Neil never really talked after that. He didn't, no interview. He wasn't on Oprah. You know what I mean? He wasn't on Geraldo. He wasn't on Good Morning America. He didn't go out and hang out. He didn't do anything, and he certainly never talked about it with anybody anywhere. There isn't. If you go and try to dig up some archival footage of him talking about his great walk on the moon, it doesn't exist, and I find that fascinating.
Well, it is. When I brought that up in the film that he had only given one interview, they immediately had him speak on the next big anniversary, whether it was 20th or 30th or whatever, and then they released some.
Oh, the White House stuff?
Yeah. Then there was probably some with the BBC that they released to kind of prove me wrong or something. The fact is, at the end of my film, you'll see in 1994, the 25th anniversary, where he's talking in the White House as a group of high school students are touring. And he says tearfully, "Perhaps someday you'll be able to remove one of truth's protective layers."
And he's looking, when he says it too, it's like
he's looking
guilt.
Straight up. It's part of the speech that he had memorized.
Yep.
He's reading the script, but this was the important part to him because he looks up and has it memorized, planned to say it, holding back tears.
Yep, you can tell. You can tell. You can definitely tell.
And this is his cryptic way of saying, I wish I could tell you the truth, but I can't. The fact is he could. They were brainwashed into thinking the world would collapse. I mean, all they had to do at any point, they could have said at the press conference, "Hey, look, we didn't go to the moon. My life has been threatened. The life of my kids have been threatened. Please, if you're listening, the FBI, Secret Service, go and protect and surround my family."
Right.
And it would have been over. They don't. They just now. It's like cheating on your wife in the first year of marriage and then telling her on your 50th anniversary. The longer it goes on, the worse and worse and worse it gets, and you have more lies and more lies added to it. It's just so sad.
Let's take a few minutes on each one of these episodes with each astronaut, because each one has got a fantastic story behind it. And by the way, Michael Collins, I swear he looks like Hunter S. Thompson on a bad day. That is just that is some incredible. The picture that I used here, I wanted to use the one where his nose was on the camera lens. I was going to use that, but you can't tell you can't tell who it is. So I backed off. He either looks like him or no, it's Hunter Thompson. That's who he looks like. So let's go to my favorite pick. Well, no, actually, they're all my favorites. They've all got their moments. But let's go to the Buzz Punch. This is Buzz Aldrin punching you in the face. I guess that's here in Los Angeles somewhere. But so for everybody, it's the second picture from the left in the second row, and it's labeled Buzz Punch. Now, so there it is. There's Buzz. I guess, hold on, let me kind of pose here for a second. So that's a straight, is that a right hook, or is it just a straight right?
I guess you call it a jab.
It's
that's
a jab.
Me all the way to the right, wearing the black sports coat and blue jeans. And that's one of the two film crews that was there.
So that's,
in fact, they all eyewitnessed the punch. And when they were asked by the police who saw it, they all denied seeing it. Because the Japanese are so afraid of shame. That's why they're lying about Fukushima. They're afraid of shame, and they didn't want any shameful thing to happen, so they all lied. And they said they did not see me being punched, when obviously all three of the Japanese crew are looking at it.
Well,
basically,
that's probably the only punch he's thrown in 50 or 60 years. So I have to ask you, Was it a good punch? Did he at least get a clean one?
Punch. It knocked me back on the heels of my feet, and I had a hurt tooth for about a year.
Well, you can clearly hear it in the video. I mean, it's a serious,
Yeah, well, let me explain a little bit what happened. Basically,
please do. Take us through it.
He didn't wake up that morning saying, "Hey, I can't wait to punch that guy," Bart Sibrel, who's a thorn in my side. And I certainly didn't wake up that morning expecting to call Buzz Aldrin a liar, a coward, and a thief. But basically, he was being filmed in the penthouse of this hotel by a Japanese crew, and I was their surprise guest. And he had just been paid $2,000 an hour for the interview. So basically, he's stealing that money was my point. And so obviously he's a liar. He's a thief for stealing that money. He's a coward for just being afraid to tell the truth. He's afraid. Everyone's afraid. He's afraid of the truth. In fact, everyone's familiar with the famous scripture, John 3:16, "For God who so loved the world that whoever believes in his Son will have eternal life." But read past it. No one reads the next couple of verses. It says, "But this is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but men love darkness instead of light, because their deeds are evil, and they will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed." There's nothing to fear but fear itself, and these guys are living out of fear of being killed, fear of telling the truth, fear of being ashamed, fear of being embarrassed. Let me tell you, it's kind of fun to tell an embarrassing story and get it off your chest. It's not hanging over your head anymore. So I started asking him to swear in the Bible, whether he walked on the moon. He refused to do it, which is smart. Neil Armstrong refused to do it. Then I wanted to take an oath on camera, could be used as a video deposition, and they'd be guilty of perjury.
Was Buzz the first guy you confronted with the Bible?
I think so. I think he was. And
where did that idea? I have to ask you, where did that idea come from?
I have no idea. I mean, I read the Bible regularly. I've read it over and over again, and I guess the idea just came to me.
And okay, well, I want to stay on this really quick, and then I'll let you finish. I promise. What about the treason aspect? I thought that was curious too. Where did that come from?
Well, that was with Alan Bean, I think. I had thrown in treason. Treason was doing something, in my mind, that is dishonorable to the domestic public. You're a traitor to your fellow countrymen. Now, Alan Bean, didn't see that definition of treason as being correct, so he took an oath, that he would not be guilty of treason, because he didn't consider. He said, even if I did lie about the moon landings, it's not treasonous. And I said it is, because you're taking the taxpayers' money and you're defrauding them. You're cheating your fellow countrymen, therefore you are treasonous. In any case, I asked him to swear in the Bible. Buzz didn't, and we kept talking, and finally I called him a liar, a coward, and a thief. And it's amazing. It was calling him a coward that really made him upset. Not a liar and not a thief. Coward. It's amazing how, I don't know how to say this, but people of kind of a not right character get really offended when you call him a coward. And yet that's the way he is living his life, because he's afraid simply to tell the truth. He's afraid of the truth.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that is brought out in a documentary like this is you see everybody's true colors. And for these guys to run away and act like they do when confronted, it should be the opposite. That's what I would expect from them. But they get angry, and they don't want to stop and either it's true or not. And I say it all the time on this show. It's either true or it's not. But these guys want to avoid both of those answers. And when you bring up treason, it's funny how everybody winces. Like, what, that too? What, and they react to that in such a way that it, for me, it's a real eye opener. And now, really quick, in the Buzz Aldrin shot, who is that his daughter, or who is that in the yellow shirt right there?
That's his stepdaughter of his now ex-wife.
Okay, I got you. And the other thing, and let's move on to the other photographs, but the other astronauts, it's kind of funny how nobody jumped to hit the old guy's defense, and I'm talking about Buzz. Nobody jumped on your back. Nobody. It was kind of a weird reaction there on the sidewalk, and
the police refused to prosecute him. They had an assault.
Well, nobody's going to prosecute Buzz
Aldrin. I know, that's what they said. They said, we don't prosecute national heroes. So I guess that means if you're a national hero, you can break the law.
Yes, that's exactly, and you can lie. Yeah, that's exactly what it means.
Go.
So, okay, let's go.
And you're a national hero because you're a liar. That's the sad thing about this.
Well,
and they have all
yeah. Unfortunately,
if they told the truth, they wouldn't be national heroes. So they're actually a national hero because they're a liar. That's what made them a hero.
Well, look at
lying.
Hey, look
at
that. Hey, Bart, look at OJ. He got away with murder. You get a certain amount of leniency when you get to a certain elevation of national hero. Buzz Aldrin could go rob a bank tomorrow, my brother, and not go to court.
But he was prosecuted and went to trial, and it was the jury's decision to acquit the guy or not. Now, a good parallel, though, would be, if they really went to the moon, then anybody who says otherwise is an idiot. And yet there are probably 300 websites totaling 100,000 hours of work to disprove the theory that the moon landings are fake. I mean, that's a lot of energy.
Right.
You know what I mean? If it's so obvious we went to the moon, then, they take apart the shadows, they take apart this, they take apart that. But you have to understand, assuming OJ was guilty, that no matter what incriminating evidence proved his guilt, like I have for the moon landing being fake, they always, his defense attorney always had a reason why the evidence wasn't real. You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And so they always have an excuse. They even have an excuse for the window shot. They say, oh, no, they were just practicing. I'm like, well, why not just practice with the real Earth out the window? Why would you bring a model?
Yeah, why do you have to do that? Right.
Every minute of the mission cost $1 million a minute. So why would you bring a fake model of the Earth on board the spacecraft when the real Earth is out the window and tiny, floating in space? It doesn't make any sense.
Let's go to the Young event. Okay, now here in this picture, and that's for everybody. It's the right in the middle of the gallery. It's the third picture in the second row, and he's walking through. He's at some kind of convention. But here you are with your Bible in this shot. And I will say this. I think at first when he saw you, he thought you were a fan or something. And then when you hit him with, well, actually, I'll let you take it. You know what I'm doing? You're the guest. So you confront Young here. What happens as he starts to walk past you?
Well, we interview him. We're a camera crew, and he assumes we're interviewing him because we think he walked on the moon. When he finds out we're interviewing him because we think he did not walk on the moon. He was in Apollo 10, and they referred to on this tape of Apollo 11 that Apollo 10 faked the same shot. And when I described the shot to him, you see him turn pale white like he sees a ghost, realizing exactly what I'm talking about because he faked the same shot on his mission. And he starts literally turning around and running away from the camera.
Doesn't he say doesn't he say something like, "Oh yeah, well how about I swear that I'll kick your ass or something?"
He does. He threatens to hit me. So I've had one Buzz punched me. Then what's his name? Edgar Mitchell. 5 seconds after he says I don't hit people, he hits me with his knee in the butt with my back to him.
I've got a picture of that.
Then they would have his son, because we left the wireless microphone on him and the camera was in the car still running. We hear their private conversation in the house where they're talking about calling the CIA to have me executed.
Oh, that's right. Now, I thought that was out in the driveway when he goes, hey, he says, doesn't he say, let's call the CIA and have him whacked? Isn't that what he says?
Right. That's right.
Why? That was such a crazy, even if it was something that they could do, it's a crazy thing to say at a moment like that. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Mind you, these are very high quality wireless microphones. The microphone was left on the astronaut. We forgot to get it off of him. the camera was still running, even though it was just sitting on the back seat of the rental car. And so the audio is being recorded of a private conversation going on in his house behind closed doors immediately after he kicked and threw us out of his house.
I thought it was. I thought
tape,
he said it in front of you. I didn't realize it was behind closed doors. That makes it
No,
really
behind-
dramatic. Wow.
Yeah, I didn't pick it up. The person doing the transcript of the interview picked up on it. I didn't notice it was there. And
we should be.
They threatened to have.
I should be playing that audio right now.
Well, I thought of another audio clip you should be playing. I forgot to mention to you, my fault. But during that sit-down interview with Buzz Aldrin, which was before we put the Bible in front of him, where we hook up the monitor in Astronauts Gone Wild and show him that, as far as he knew, for that moment, the story had broken worldwide that the moon landings were fake. And he said, as you may remember, and this makes you such a real famous person for having discovered all this. What an ego you must have for want to propel your career like this.
Right.
How could I be famous and propel my career if I'm wrong?
Right.
Then he goes on to say, now if you show this to anybody, I'm going to sue you, because he remembers he made an admission. We have Buzz Aldrin admitting that I'm right on camera.
Right. And now this isn't conjecture, or you're saying something that you heard, or no, this is actually on film. I've seen it and heard it myself. And for Buzz, the way that he says it, and he's confrontational with you, but the way that Buzz Aldrin turns to you and says, and I suppose, this is going to make you, famous for breaking this, breaking this story. It was like he was, not like, he was just admitting right there on camera that you were the guy that broke the story. And it's a weird moment, because I guess you're right. He thinks the story's already broke. Yeah, that would make sense, right, because that's exactly what he's doing. He's acting like he's coming clean, and he's upset that you're the guy.
Then it started coming to him that maybe I'm not with the big network, maybe I'm independent, and he started procrastinating leaving. And then right before he left, of course we have this on camera too, he says if you show this interview of his admission to anybody, he's going to sue us. So he realized he made the admission that was correct on camera, and then he tries to threaten to sue us if we show it to anybody. And another interesting thing he said during the interview, when he thought the story had broken worldwide, that the moon missions were fake, he said, well, we were just passengers.
Yeah, why does he say yeah? Why would he say that?
He was supposed to be the pilot who landed the lunar module on the surface of the moon, and he just admitted he didn't do it.
He said
I was a passenger.
He said,
and you better believe it. When you're on a rocket and you go up and you orbit the Earth and you come back down, you are a passenger. You don't pilot anything.
Yeah, he says, and I'll quote for you, Bart. He says, "We were just passengers. Why are you talking to me about this? Talk to them." And it's a weird statement to make. All right, let's go on to Neil Armstrong. This is a very, I don't know how you maintain your composure in this, but in this photograph, and this is, I have to back out and scroll for a second. Okay, this is picture number 4 in row number 2. And so in this shot, when you click on it, that's you, Bart, on the left with your media badge. I love that. With the Bible. I don't know.
Want to be shot,
yeah, right.
Want to make it official.
You should have one of those blue United Nations press vest on.
Give me one of those.
Yeah. Oh man! So I don't know who's in the middle, but this obviously Neil Armstrong is over here on the right, and the guy in the middle calls you Sibrel, Mr. Sibrel. So explain to us what's going on here, and it's kind of extraordinary that Neil's in public.
Well, he's not actually in public. This is at a shareholders meeting.
For EDO Corporation or something?
I think so.
Right.
It's up some skyscraper in New York City. And he is saying farewell. He's basically one of either the CEO or a board member of this company. Basically, if you say the first man who walked on the moon is on my board or CEO, you got it made, whether he does anything,
right,
whether he ever shows up or ever gives any input. unfortunately for him, Neil Armstrong, this company makes alleged smart bombs to kill people. And so that's, after that tear-filled moment in 1994, he became soulless in my mind, because I've seen him face to face, and looked at him closely when he said that remark. And again, we met 2 or 3 times in person, and he looks soulless. He looks like one of those military people who would kill you in a heartbeat and go home and eat fried chicken and think nothing of it. He used to have a heart, and he didn't. The interesting thing is that Buzz used to be that way, and now Buzz seems to have a heart. So somebody's going to come forward eventually, probably in my lifetime, I hope and pray, and expose this.
Well, you bring up a great point right there, and we have so much more to get into. I didn't think that this is, when you do a show like this, it's crazy how the time just blows by. Now we're running out of time. We only have another half hour or so to squeeze in so much more information. So I want to cut you off there so I can make this point. Buzz, at one point when you're sitting in his office during that interview, on the Astronauts Gone Wild take, for a split second there, I think he was going to open up his mouth, and he stopped himself. And it was at the moment when you said, well, how come Neil doesn't do interviews? And Buzz responds with, hey, well, that's him. But me, I'm a little bit different. And me, he was right on the edge of talking. Then he grabbed hold of himself. And that is what happens at that moment on tape. He immediately stops himself. And could you tell when you were was that the feeling you were getting at that moment in the office? Was he getting ready to, do you think you had him right there at that moment?
I definitely had him. Looking back on it, I wish I had talked less. I kept trying to argue with him. I wish I would have shut up and let him talk more.
Yeah, that's my point.
That's what I wish I would have done. But, again, he thought the whole thing was unraveling, virtually going to be on national news that night. That's why he was so mad and accusing me of having, impure motives to propel my career, and admitting he's only a passenger, blaming NASA for faking the moon mission instead of the guy who actually did it himself.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's pretty sad. He loves the limelight. Now, let me also say this for the record. I thought it was wrong to call him a liar, a coward, and a thief. The Bible says to rebuke an older man gently, and I did not do that. I since apologized to Buzz Aldrin for saying that. And oddly enough, the very next day, he ordered a DVD of If Anything Happened on the Way to the Moon. We have a log of it with his Beverly Hills address.
Well, I've met Buzz and talked to him quite a bit, but and his wife is lovely too. In a very strange way, she's a lot smarter than he is. And if you know the two of them, you will understand. She runs that house. She wears the pants, which is kind of an odd thing to say. But it's my job and what I do, whether I'm interviewing you or having this conversation now, or I'm at the checkout line at Ralph's up the street, I talk to everybody. I don't have an issue with talking to people. I love to do it. I just do. But let me tell you something. I would never cross the line with Buzz Aldrin like that. I so badly wanted to ask him if he saw anything strange on the moon. I wanted to ask him, hey, man, were there any flying saucers in the background? Was there, any ETs running around? Were you up there on a secret mission to meet them? It's my opportunity. But you know what? I didn't do it. I was intimidated. And watching the way people treat him with such respect, I didn't want to step out of the box. And I wanted to. And I've asked tons of people that question in my life, but I just couldn't do it with Buzz. I don't know how you managed to. You got socked. There's that answer. But
here's how you do it. You realize that you're in the right, and what you're doing is a just cause. And being a hero is not being afraid. It's being afraid and doing it anyway.
Right.
Yeah, I was nervous going up to Neil Armstrong. I also offered him $5,000 cash to give to his favorite charity, $1,000 a second, to put his hand on the Bible and say, I swear to God I walked on the moon. And he refused to do it.
So that was really $5,000 in your hand, by the way? It looked a little thin to me. It was.
I wanted $10,000, but for some reason, executive producer, I thought $10,000 it sounded better, but the executive producer would only give me $5,000 for some reason.
Okay, let's jump on to Edgar Mitchell. Now this photograph of Edgar, it almost looks like it's gay porn. It's not. I want everybody to understand this. I
never thought about it that way. Thank you very much.
It looks a little funky. But what happens here, and I'll let you tell the story again, but you have just shown Mitchell the discovery that you made of the videotape. And
of all the astronauts, he was absolutely the worst liar. If you look at his face during the interview in Astronauts Gone Wild, he's just totally unconvincing. And then I pop in this tape of showing them faking part of the moon mission, which he is completely aware of because he has every book and video about the moon landings being fake in his library right there on the shelf. He keeps up with it. And he knew exactly what that footage was, and when I showed it to him, that's when he kind of started breaking down. And, of course, proof that he's a liar is he says, I don't hit people. And then 5 seconds later, he hits somebody.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
With their back to him.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
He doesn't have the guts to hit somebody when they're facing them. And then he threatens to have somebody else kill him for him, because he wouldn't do it himself. It's pathetic. The guy goes around like he's this new age guru. You know what I mean?
Right.
Lying to his own son. What made him mad was that I talked to his son and said, you need to know the truth. And when he saw me trying to convince his son of the truth, who believes the lie that he went to the moon, that's what made him really mad.
So that was his son. That you can't see him because his son is standing behind Mitchell in this shot. But that was his son?
Correct.
Okay. All right. I didn't know if it was his grandson.
So, obviously we're getting literally physically kicked out.
Yep.
In the rush, I leave the wireless microphone on him. I leave the camera running. It's in my hand, and I just sit it on the back seat of the car for some reason with the tape still running, and the wireless microphone still on Edgar Mitchell with the doors closed in his house. And now what's recorded on the tape, and I never would have found it, but the person doing the transcript did, we hear them discussing calling the CIA to have me executed. Can you believe it?
If I hadn't heard it, Bart.
Let me tell you this, Jimmy. Wait,
okay,
Jimmy,
go ahead.
If it weren't for the incredible backlog, I would be dead by
now. Well played. Well, if I hadn't heard it myself, if you would have just, if I hadn't seen the documentary, either one, but if I hadn't seen that and you would come on this program and say that Edgar Mitchell and his son sat inside the house and you have proof of it, that they were going to call the CIA and have me whacked, I would say that you were crazy. And I would ask you, do you have proof? And you would say, no, I don't, but I heard it. Well, then you know what that makes, it's an unbelievable statement to make. But you do have it. And it's right there. And when you hear it, it is so out of place and just so weird because, look, they don't like you. You had an upsetting moment, misrepresentation on an interview and okay, all right, get the hell out of my house. Cool. You're getting in your car. You're driving away. Let it go. But don't have a conversation behind everybody's back about calling the CIA and having this guy whacked. That is crazy. I wish I would have thought about that ahead of time. And you too. It's on you too. You should have reminded me. I would have had that audio.
Well, another thing to consider, I just thought of it now, was if they really went to the moon and I was just some crazy person who thought they didn't, why would he call the CIA and have me killed?
Yeah, what's the point? And it's the way that he says it too.
The fact that he's got these, espionage connections and tells you he's involved in espionage. And that you would only kill somebody for exposing the truth, not if they were, telling something that wasn't true. What difference would it make?
He's just a retired astronaut, man. Kid, relax. Oh, no, Dad. Let's call the CIA and get him whacked. What? It's just a crazy thing. All right. So the next picture is Mitchell. This is when, not Mitchell. This is Alan Bean. And this is when he drops a couple of F-bombs right here at this moment. As a matter of fact, when I grab this still, I want you to look at your face here in this picture. You're looking at him, and this is when he drops the F-bomb and tells you to get the F out of his house. And that's the look on your face as Alan Bean. I tried to get his lips forming I just couldn't grab that frame. But that's the look on your face as he says this to you. And how did you feel at that moment? And actually, look at the background. Do you see what's in the background on the tripod?
Yeah, he paints. He paints all this stuff and sells them, for a living, I guess.
Yeah.
He's the guy who totally blew it about the Van Allen radiation belt. He said on camera, we did not go through the Van Allen radiation belt. And then when I pointed out to him, the Van Allen radiation belt is between Earth orbit and the moon, he says, oh, I guess we went through them. And I said, was there any strange report of radiation or any weird effects? No, none at all. I said, well, the space shuttle went up to 635 miles away from the radiation, and they saw it with their eyes closed. And he said, oh, yeah, we saw it too. I said, but wait a minute. It was reported for the first time in 1994. I said, oh, yeah, we saw it, but it wasn't reported until then. He just kept making one lie after another to cover himself for not going through and knowing really nothing about the Van Allen radiation belt.
Did you find that a little unnerving after a while, hearing different stories from such obvious things from each one of the astronauts? They all can't be wrong or they all can't be right, but half and half. You know what I mean? Yeah. How could they not know? How could anybody not know if not know? He emphatically said that they didn't go through the radiation belt.
Right. Another interesting thing is Eugene Cernan. He said that the engine during the descent to the moon was very loud, and Alan Bean said the descent to the engine was completely silent because of the vacuum of space.
So which is it?
Exactly. It's only one or the other.
Right.
One says it's extremely loud. One says it's perfectly quiet. You see, that doesn't make any sense. And it's amazing. You have these obvious facts. The window shot of them faking a shot right in front of your eyes. The talk, shadows intersecting. The administrator resigning. All of these things, and people still say we went to the moon. In fact, I've talked to a professor at a college, and I said, "What if Neil Armstrong went on national TV and said we didn't go?" You know what he said? He said, I still believe we went. That's how stubborn these people are. It's an arrogance of what man can do. That's why we open up with the Tower of Babel. Look what man can do. We can build a tower that reaches to the heavens. The Titanic, the ship that God himself could not sink, we put in writing. And then Nixon said, putting a man on the moon when he knew we weren't there was the greatest event since creation.
Well,
can't you imagine?
Yeah, I was having this discussion the other day with some people here at KJCR about this. If you live in North Korea, you only know. What blows my mind there is the people of North Korea really feel or believe that Kim Jong-un, Kim Jong-il, that whole family was born from gods on a mountaintop, and that's where the family was given to them, by gods. And
I thought he was born at a bus stop.
So if that is all that you are ever taught, and you don't have any other media or any other way of learning, and you're taught this from the day that you are born, and you're okay, all right. So if you and I go there and try to tell them different and tell them what the real truth is, well, they may hear you and they may believe you, but that's not, or understand you, but that's not what they're going to believe. They choose to believe what they want to believe. So no matter what the truth is, and I can't blame somebody for having solid beliefs. In fact, in a weird way, it's kind of commendable.
At the same time, Jesus said, in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, You have to be not an adult, a child. See, a child is teachable. And men get stuck in their ways and become unteachable at very early ages. And it says God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. What is humility? It's the willingness to be wrong. I believe the moon landings are real for almost 30 years. And I only want to know the truth. The side topic, you may disagree with it, but I worshiped on Sunday most of my life. I only just started worshiping on Saturday.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? That's new to me.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, and to that same, on that same note, how many of these 8? Because I think it kind of comes out a little bit in the documentary. How many of them didn't believe in God? This is not a religious show, so I'm not going there. That's not my point. But some of them reacted to, why would I swear in the Bible? I don't believe, I don't even believe in God.
Yeah, the people who swore in the Bible were the people who did not believe in God. They said so.
Yeah.
That's why it didn't matter to them.
Right.
Buzz Aldrin believes in God, and Neil Armstrong, from what I understand, believes in God. I'm sure he really believes in God now.
Right.
In any case, so it's really the people who were atheists or along those lines who swore in the Bible because it meant nothing to them.
Yeah, I found that to be shocking. Okay, let's get to Anders, and I don't know if this is where was this at? Disney World, or where was this?
No, this is at NASA.
It's at NASA,
in Florida. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I was being sarcastic with that, but that's what it looks like.
Close.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe had some of the same contractors.
So they let you into NASA. Okay.
Oh, yeah, I had an appointment, and I had a reservation and everything. Interestingly enough, I mean, we have free press. Is that right in America? Yes or no?
Well, you're on this show,
we know the
right?
Answer. Okay, well, get this. I have a reservation to be there. I'm credentialed media, and as soon as I start asking people whether they went to the moon or not, security escorts me off the premises. So, do we have freedom of the press in America or not? I'm at a government installation that tax dollars paid for, with an invitation in writing, with credentials, with a reservation, and when I ask an uncomfortable question, just a word, I am escorted off the premises by security for doing what? For asking the wrong question.
Have you ever talked to any spokesman at NASA about this?
Not on the record.
Are they willing to talk? I mean, have you done a request?
I've talked to several people at NASA off the record. I had a very high-ranking person, I think in the late 80s, tell me point blank that the moon landings were fake. And he said, well, Bart, what's more important than this? He said Planet X. He told me in the late 80s that Planet X was coming into the solar system this decade that we're in now. So I don't know how many decades. He told me that like 25 years ahead of time. He said they're tracking Planet X. It's going to be here in the second half of the first decade of the 21st century. That's what he told me. He told me that in the late 80s.
Now,
the same guy who told me that the moon landings were fake.
Okay. Wow, I don't know how Planet X got into this conversation, but
I figured. What I'm telling you is there's so much I didn't put in the film. Because of the relatives of the astronauts are pursuing their own legal action of various things, and there's agreements to release certain information on certain dates by certain people. And, when a guy at NASA tells you the moon landings are fake, before I even believe it myself, he ends up being right, you start thinking, well, what was that he said about Planet X 25 years ago?
Right.
Come and win in the second half of the first decade of the 21st century. What?
Right.
See, when a person robs a bank and gets away with it, they're just emboldened to rob another bank for more money. And they keep doing it. And because they got away with JFK and the same people got away with faking the moon landing, it just emboldens them to keep faking and faking and faking. And yeah, let's bring it up because the the elite people, whoever they are, whatever you want to call them, want to depopulate the world by about 95%. And rather than going down in history as the next Hitler, they're going to let Mother Nature do it for them. That's why they're keeping Planet X a secret. And the guy at NASA who told me the moon landings were fake said, I need to really do a film about that. He said, that's significant because that's going to affect everybody on the planet Earth and wipe 50 to 90% people off through earthquakes, meteor showers, and tidal waves.
I got a quick question that just came in. Well, it didn't come in. I just didn't get a chance to get to it. But anyway, this is from Devin. And the question is, has your guest studied Marcus Allen's moon landing hoax ideas?
You know, that name rings a bell, but I don't remember specifically.
He's one of those guys out there. He's been on Art Bell, and that answers that question. And let's see. What is the guest explanation of China's and India's lunar probe images showing traces of the Apollo 17 landing site and rover tracks?
Well, you got to remember they already faked full body pictures of an astronaut standing on the surface of the moon. So if a lunar satellite probe that shows alleged scratches that are alleged footprints or an alleged shadow, those can easily be fake. Now, if they're coming from Chinese satellites, which I'm not sure that's the case rather than American, but if they were coming from Chinese or Japanese or whoever, obviously they're in cahoots with the United States government, obviously. Well, if I were China and really an enemy, morally, politically, ideologically of the United States. You know what I would have done with that rover? I mean, the whole moon is desolate, so what difference does one quadrant over another matter? I would have landed that thing exactly at the Apollo 11 landing site and taken a picture of it and shown it to the world. Hey, look, here's the lander, or here it is not. But they didn't do that. You know what I mean?
Well, that's a good point. But how do you respond to? I was talking to a couple of people this week, and they actually brought up this program tonight. And one of them, who has been a guest on this show, it was somebody that I respect. I'm not going to name him right now. It wouldn't be right. But he said, Jimmy, you can get a telescope right now and you can look at the moon and you can see the rovers. You can see the flag. Man, you can even see the lunar module. You can see all of that. You can see it. So how do you so how do you respond to that?
That's folklore. That's the half. That's folklore. It's not true. That's like saying the frog will give you warts. You have 100 people say it. People keep repeating it, and sooner or later people think it's true. According to NASA, there is no Earth-based telescope powerful enough to see any man-made objects left on the moon. Also, according to NASA, the Hubble telescope is too powerful to focus on an object that close. Now, for example, I got a call from a Japanese film crew the other day, and they said they wanted to license the footage of me punching Neil Armstrong. You see how mixed up it is already?
Right.
I'm the one who got punched by Buzz Aldrin.
Right.
But they say they want a copy of the clip of me punching Neil Armstrong.
Right.
You see, this person who says it's the Chinese probe that took a picture of the alleged shadow, 1/8 of an inch tall of the lunar lander, or this little line in the dirt that's supposedly the footprints, it's probably from an American probe. Not a Chinese probe. They're probably mixing those two stories together.
Let's move on.
If I'm wrong about that, if I'm wrong and it is a Chinese probe, then they're obviously in cahoots.
Well,
what I mean?
This is okay. Your response is different than how I responded to my friend, which is this: if we faked it, then we shot up. We landed a lunar module on the moon. There just wasn't any men in it. And so we could have evidence of it later. So when we did go to the moon in the future, it's at least sitting there when they get there, and the rover would be sitting there. So that's my take. So whether you could see it, and I cannot believe I can't go down right now to Costco and buy one of those telescopes, and it's not strong enough. It's not really.
Yeah, I'm afraid, according to NASA, no, not even the biggest telescope on planet Earth
So
is
you're
powerful enough to see, 1 foot, 3 foot objects on the moon.
So when Herschel, whose birth date was today, John Herschel, in 1825, with his telescope, his handmade telescope, discovers the moons around Saturn, that today we don't have a telescope powerful enough to look at rocks on the moon. A rock that's
the moons around Saturn. Some of those are bigger than the Earth. They're huge, and we're talking about reading a newspaper. From a distance of 250,000 miles. It's completely different.
Somebody's telling me two different stories. I thought that we could read license plates from satellites orbiting the Earth, but we can't.
That's right. That's from 23,000 miles away.
Right. That's nothing.
Not 230,000 miles away. Which
it's
is
only 10 times. Yeah. Okay. Whose side are you? I think you're a disinformation guy.
I'm just telling you what NASA told me. I called them up. I called up their information department. You can do it too.
Right.
Call them up and ask them, is there a telescope on Earth that can see artifacts from the Apollo missions on the moon? Their answer is no. There is no Earth-based telescope powerful enough. Then you ask them the Hubble. Can the Hubble see artifacts left on the moon? Then their official answer is no. It's too powerful. Now, I happen to have been in contact with people who ran the Hubble, and they said, actually, it could. That's a lie. So, it could, point and prove that nothing there. I can also tell you that I met someone who dated the daughter of a space shuttle astronaut who is now deceased. And he told her that he knew that the moon missions were fake. People don't understand this. Pick any distance wherever you are from LA or wherever you're listening from, and pick a distance that's 200 miles away. That's as far up as the space shuttle is. That's it. 200 miles. The moon is 1,000 times farther than that. And to say we could go 1,000 times farther nearly 5 decades ago with technology half a century older than we can go today just does not make sense.
That's one of the best arguments that you actually have. It's one of the strongest things that you can say. And anybody that can think, logic comes into play here. Anybody that can think logically, and you look at it and just stop for a second. All you got to do is just stop and think. That's one of the best arguments. That's one of the best. The stars, the Hasselblad. We didn't even get into one of the things I wanted to talk about that you don't talk about in the documentary is film and temperature and radiation. And when back in the day, forget about today with digital cameras, but back in the day, and you're old enough to remember film, if anything happened strange to your camera, sat on the back seat of the car for too long, sat in the windshield of the car, sat on the towel on the beach for a little too long, or you're out skiing and you dropped it in the snow, anything went funky with your camera, you had no pictures. None. And your vacation was ruined. But yet, they didn't have special film. There was nothing crazy about the film that they took to the moon. The Hasselblad cameras had no special insulation for the temperature. Forget about radiation and anything else. There was nothing that they just went up there and fired off perfect pictures.
Well, Von Braun has a book, and I got a copy of it, and he says you cannot go to the moon in one rocket. It would take 3 rockets, each taller than the Empire State Building, each weighing 800,000 tons. The Saturn V rocket only weighed 3,000 tons. It's a factor of total mass with fuel of about a difference of 55,000%. He also said you'd have to build a space station first, and then from there go to the moon. He also said once you landed on the moon, you'd have to immediately go into a cave because there would be a 50% chance every 24 hours of a catastrophic failure due to micrometeorites.
And the other consideration that nobody brings into this, and I'm talking about either debunkers
or somebody that says that we did go to the moon. But the one thing that is always completely ignored is micrometeorites. And I cannot, if you're in Earth's orbit and you're dealing with gravity and there's reasons why you're not hitting micrometeorites, I get that. But when you're out there in space and you're freewheeling it for 250,000 miles, 500,000 miles round trip, there's all kinds of things that are going to potentially penetrate that aluminum that is shielding you from space or your spacesuits. You know,
yeah, I'm looking up right now how many meteorites hit the Earth in a day. I'm looking it up right here to see if I can find it here. Okay, it looks like it's okay, I'm trying to find it real quick. See if you can find it, but it looks like in the tens of thousands.
Right.
Every day. And then there are even finer particles that these don't even attribute that are the size of a piece of sand. Well, you take a piece of sand and you shoot it out at 40,000 miles an hour. And that's going to go through about 5 feet of lead. You know what I mean?
Right.
At that speed, and it would go through the spacesuits, the spacecraft. It would cause decompression of the atmosphere, and go through their skull and give them brain damage. You know, that's never talked about either, is it?
Here's another
the Van
one.
Allen radiation belt protects you from cosmic radiation and solar radiation as well. So they would be beyond that and be wide open to all sorts of solar and galactic radiation.
So this just came in from Brad. It says we've left mirrors to shoot lasers to get the moon's distance. The mirrors were placed by Apollo. You can shoot a laser and get the reflection.
A lot of people talk about that. First, he needs to look up in a National Geographic article. I got it from the late 50s, early 60s. They were bouncing lasers off of the moon before the Apollo missions successfully in calibrating the distance from the moon. You don't need a mirror to do it. There are reflective surfaces off the moon, if you know where they are, that work just as good as a mirror. Secondly, the Soviet Union put an unmanned probe on the moon with mirrors on it. So it doesn't take the manned vehicle to do it. And you don't even need mirrors to do it. And that's their lame excuse as to why the moon landings are real. The fact is, you can X-ray a toaster 1,000 times and it will still make toast. But if you put people on the moon's surface with all this radiation and micrometeorites, it will kill them.
Out of all of okay, now we've only got literally, man, we've got like four minutes left, 5 minutes, or you're going to have to end the show with me at in 8 minutes. Out of everybody, I want to talk about Michael Collins because not only was he in the command module, and he was the first guy to, or he was one of the first three, I should say, to hoax the moon landings because he was there. He was a participant. But out of all the guys, what was your favorite moment? Do I have to leave Buzz Aldrin out, and do I have to leave Edgar Mitchell out?
In meeting the astronauts?
Yeah. What's the one moment?
I'll tell you my favorite moment. My favorite moment was the off-the-record private conversation I had with one or more astronaut who acknowledged that I was correct.
So, what? Wait, whoa. Here, let me hit rewind. Okay, say that again.
I can't say who, but one or more of the astronauts acknowledged to me that I was correct in my accusations.
Okay, so you're not going to say who, but did he get? Was it one of them that got really mad?
I can tell you this.
Well, they all got mad.
Because the way that people appear on camera and the way they appear off camera may be quite different from one another.
Okay,
those were my favorite moments of meeting the astronauts.
Okay, and out of all of them being likable guys, I'm going to say Warden. Was he the coolest? He's a pretty cool guy.
None of them were likable. All of them acted like they had about a 10-foot corn cob shoved up their butt. And they were all uptight. They were all unhappy. They were all complainers. They were all greedy, wanted to be paid in cash in advance. Although that's not necessarily a sign of greed, but they were all uncomfortable, unhappy, cursing men.
I noticed that too. Each one of these guys did not have an issue with knowing that there's a camera, right there, that F-bombs were pretty easy for them to distribute. I was surprised with that. And, forget about the threat of death and killing and beating up and ass whipping and all of that stuff. That okay, all right. But just to be able to just freely drop F-bombs like that on camera, I thought that was I was taken aback. That's all. These guys, we respect them and hold them in such high regard, and I still do. The fact that they were test pilots and cheated death, looked death in the face so many moments. You got to have a lot of respect for that, and I do. But for them to show their colors so easily on camera, you'd think that they'd have more restraint and have been practiced in that.
Well, they don't. They're very cocky and arrogant because they've gotten away with it. There was one of those. Okay, well, hold
on, Bart. I'm going to cut you off. I want that one question answered, though. Who was there had to be one guy that you liked. Wasn't one guy likable? You wanted to give a hug? One?
No, they were all uptight, angry, unlikable people.
Wow. I'm going to forward.
You can imagine why. They're carrying around this guilt of this crime and being treated like a hero that they don't deserve everywhere they go, every day of their life, lying to their spouse, lying to their children, lying to their grandchildren, lying to college students, lying to aerospace engineers about how easy it was to go to the moon in the 1960s. That can't make you happy.
Wow. Okay, let's just wind this down then. I'm going to say thank you very much. This was I really look forward to this for a couple of weeks, and thank you for taking the time. I'm going to forward all of the hate mail straight to you when we're done with it. This is the thing, is our audience here, they come here, everybody has an open mind, no matter what. And, they come to this show because they want to learn something. We all want to be entertained, but they come here to learn. They have an open mind, go and investigate, and come back. I have on guests that I just want to have an interesting conversation is the best way that I can put it. And I want go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, if you had cancer, would you want your doctor to lie to you to make you happy, or would you want to know the truth even though it was depressing? And that's how it is about the truth about the moon landing. It's depressing that our country has sunk so low and done such a deplorable thing. But unless we confess it, it's going to get worse. And if we can pop the blister now, it'll be messy, but it will heal. But if we don't pop it, it's going to be gangrene, and eventually the whole body is going to die. And people have to be truth seekers. Just go to Sibrel.com, YouTube link. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon. It's 45 minutes long, and it has that footage in there of them faking a shot right in front of your eyes. You decide for yourself. The fact is they didn't go. It's sad. I wish they went. You said what part of making these movies was fun? Not any of it.
Right.
Possibly editing the music might have been fun.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because it's depressing.
Right.
I hate making documentaries. They're so tedious. It's mind-boggling. I spent 4,000 hours editing that 45-minute movie. But it's a truth that has to be told. Do you want to know if you have cancer or not? Or do you want to just go about your merry way pretending like you don't?
Right. How do you I'll give you 15 seconds, and then obviously you're going to stay with me to the end. I'll let you we'll roll credits together. How's that? But how do you grow your skin to be so thick to deflect the amount of email and credits you must get from some people after seeing the documentary? I mean, I hear you. You're going to change minds, but you've also got that one in 100 that actually takes the time to write that really salacious email and come straight at you.
Yeah, I would say I get 9 hate mails for every 1 complimentary email, and
it's kind of like this show.
I try to pray for those people. It's amazing. People go out of their way to curse and threaten to kill me, and they support violence. They support assault. I mean, a guy is hitting somebody for just speaking words, and they endorse a crime. They endorse assault. They endorse my death. You know, all because I said the moon landings were fake. Such a simple thing.
Right.
They think it's unpatriotic to say the moon landings are fake. I say it's unpatriotic to have faked them in the first place. You know, and to a naive Boy Scout, have your head so far up Uncle Sam's butt you can't see the truth.
Right.
You know what I mean? If your spouse is cheating on you, wouldn't you want to know?
Right.
You know what I mean? And our government is cheating on us.
Well, maybe sometimes
sometimes
you just don't want to know. So, you know, that's the truth, too. Stay with it. Hey, Brad, let's just roll out together. Or Bart, I'm sorry. And I'll talk to you later on this weekend. Okay? All right, so let's just do this together. I don't want to say bye now. Let's just say bye later. Special thanks to Keith Rowland. Stay tuned. Coming up next is Explorations with Michio Kaku. And then after that is After Dark Live, my favorite show with Brian Alvarez. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Kamurian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. Announcers are Steve Harder and Mark D. Kovar. Music, you're listening to him right now, Doug Aldrich from Whitesnake. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. Special thanks to Bart Sibrel. Everybody have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon. I'm going to go hang out in the social forums. Say good night, Bart.
Good night, Bart.
Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Wow.